the rabies? Yeah, he did. He's banged into. Dear God, today as this session opens, we pray that your presence will be before us and everyone who serves in the decision-making process of our city. We pray for direction which will lead our city to be strong and unified. May we continue the legacy of our founders. May we be granted this day the wisdom to make decisions which will be for the good of our city. We also pray for your special blessing on all those who are working to transform our city and make it a better place to live and work. Amen. If you please honor our nation's flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Councilor Mendonça.
Here.
Councilor Mercia.
Here.
Mayor Murphy.
Here.
Councilor Nguyen.
Here.
Councilor Elliott. Here. Councilor Kennedy.
Here.
Councilor Leahy. Here. Councilor Laurie.
Here.
Councilor Martin.
Here.
9 present.
Thank you. First up, we have the city clerk's portion of the agenda, minutes of the city council meeting of May 7th, and also minutes of the finance subcommittee of May 7th for acceptance.
Move to accept.
Move to accept and place on file by Councilor Laurie, seconded by Councilor Mendonça. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Communication. Rabies Spree Day Cost Sheet 2013. I believe we have a speaker on this.
Yes, Darlene Wood.
Good evening. Everyone received a packet of how we did at our Rabies Spree Day a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, yes.
As you can see, it was a great success.
Yeah.
Are there any questions on the packet itself that you received?
Any discussion, councilors? Councilor Laurie.
The only thing I'd like to add, and I asked for this report last week, or one similar. I heard nothing but good things about it. A few citizens got a hold of me. They'd like to see it done more often. Well, whatever you did that day, I wasn't able to stop by. I heard nothing but good things. I just wanted to say, just to let you know, say congratulations.
Thank you very much. Just for the future reference, we do plan on having some added features at it. We're going to have it so there'll be less wait for the people. So we'll certainly make it a better event every year.
Thank you very much. Any further discussion? Councilor Mercia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Darlene. Welcome aboard, and you're doing a great job.
Thank you.
When you say that they put a chip in an animal, a microchip, do they have to cut them most likely, right?
No, it's only about the size of a piece of rice, and it actually is an instrument that actually goes right in under the skin. It doesn't go into the muscle, and then that way, when we pick an animal up, or even if it's outside somewhere else, we can just scan them, and then it will pop up with all your information, so we can actually bring it right to your home.
Now, my daughter has a cat that was microchipped when she got it from bought it from the Humane Society. Does that machine work to chip if they found her cat?
Yes, works on cats, dogs, ferrets.
But I mean, even though they didn't put in the chip that day, they put it in at another place like the Humane Society, they still can detect who owns that cat.
As long as she registered it. You should make sure that she registered it. The Humane Society most likely would have.
Okay.
Worst case scenario, it would come back to the Humane Society, and then they'd be able to track your daughter down. But
Sure.
she really should register it. That's the only thing that people seem to forget.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
That's interesting.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this item? Motion to accept and place on
Thank
file.
you.
So moved by Councilor Mendonça, seconded by Councilor Mercia. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Thank you for being here. Next, we have city manager's portion of the agenda, communication from city manager, responses to city council motions and requests. Any discussion? Councilor
Yes.
Mercia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There was something in our packet, and I know Henry's on vacation this week, so he's not here, but we did establish a taxi cab and livery commission, and this Wednesday, May 22nd, next Wednesday, May 22nd at 6:30, right in the mayor's reception room, they're going to hold the taxi and Livery Commission, and I plan on speaking at it because we did have an issue where a client came into the sheriff's department and had to take a cab because his brother had to work early that morning, and he took a cab, and he said to me, gee, it was pretty expensive from Drum Hill to this place on Summer Street, and it cost me $16.80. I said, that is an exorbitant amount of money. So I said, did you flag down the cab or did you call the cab? He said, I actually called the cab. Here's my cell phone and here's the number, and it shows you that I just called it. So I called the number that it showed, and I said, I'm interested to take a cab from Summer Street to Drum Hill. How much would that be? And she said, wait a minute, I'll ask the man here. She came back to the phone and said, that'd be $12.25. I said, then how come a client just came in the opposite direction and they charge him $16.80? That's $4.55 more. This is not right. She said, well, I don't know what you're gonna do about it. I'm sorry, I don't know what happened. You didn't place a call here. I said, yes, he did place a call there. I could prove it. She said, we have no detection of this. So I'm gonna report this. I talked to another cab driver, a different cab, and he said it was $8.50. So $8.50 to $12.25 to $16.80 for the same location. And when I said to the woman, you know, we do have a taxi cab and livery commission, she said, so what? So I say, so what? We're gonna find out so what on Wednesday. So I'm glad to see that this was here. Thank you, Mr. Manager.
Thank you. Councilor Kennedy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just regarding the comments from Councilor Mercia, I think it's just always a good job when you get into a cab if you ask the driver to call in and see and just verify what the fare is with the dispatcher, and that way, I think it might be a little more uniform than just having the driver say whatever he thinks the fare is. But, so that's just a comment. Under the city manager's agenda, item B, based on the city manager's request, I would like to move that, that issue be referred to the City Council Subcommittee on Municipal Facilities for periodic oversight.
Motion by Councilor Kennedy, seconded by Councilor Leahy, to refer to the Committee on Municipal Facilities. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Mr. Manager?
Just a comment. That's we're happy to do that. The other part of that report includes the recommendations regarding further capital improvements that may necessitate at some point discussions with the Finance Subcommittee. Would it make sense to have a joint subcommittee? Combined?
It would make sense to send it to both subcommittees, but I didn't make that motion. My motion is just
I
to send it
understand.
to facilities, but
I was just friendly.
I understand,
idea.
Mr. Manager. If the Finance Committee or the chairman of the Finance Committee wants to make that motion, that's fine with me, but
Councilor Mendonça, motion to also refer to the Finance Subcommittee for the various portions.
For the
considered.
loan order portions of it that.
Sure. So moved by Councilor Mendonça, seconded by Councilor Laurie. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Under Communications, Councilor Elliott. and then
Thank you,
Councilor
Mr.
Leahy.
Mayor. I just wanted to follow up on Councilor Mercia's concern on the taxi cab commission, because I did file that for specifically, my motion was to look into metering of cabs, and I was just looking for the notice, Mr. Manager. I know that there is a meeting coming up on May 22nd, but I didn't see any subject matter, and I understand Councilor Kennedy's thought that people should call in and get, make sure they get their fare, but, that doesn't always happen, and I'm not sure what the cost is for metering, but I do think we should look into it, because then the buyer, the person getting into the cab knows exactly what that cost is. I'm going to presume that this, that the zone wasn't posted, and I just think it's a very confusing system. And you see a lot of cabs in the city now, so I just hope that is discussed at the meeting, because I think it makes sense, and it'd be interesting to see what the cost is. But I think it's just a good way to give people that need cabs, that, if they had a lot of money, they'd be driving cars, to give them a break and make sure that they're not getting overcharged.
Mr. Manager.
Councilor, just the primary purpose of the, I'm looking at the meeting notice here that I assume was forwarded on to the clerk's office for posting. It is to discuss the council motion regarding placing meters in taxi
Right.
cabs.
Excellent.
So I think that that should be the major topic discussed that night.
I know I didn't include it in the motion, but there was also, Mr. Wilson did bring it up, the conditions of the cabs, the cleanliness, and safety as well. So hopefully that can be discussed as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Council Leahy and then Council Lowry.
Thank you. Just wanted to refer to my motion about the trash from trash barrels from the downtown area. I appreciate the report, and I did run into Commissioner Snow this week, and he filled me in on what they were doing. But I just had a question. In the report, through you to the manager, when it does say that, over the next couple of months, they'll be doing that, does that actually mean it's gonna take a few months, or would we be getting ready for this? I mean, because I know the mayor's put a lot of motions in about downtown, so actually wouldn't take until July or August, right? I mean, we're gonna...
No, it'll be done over the course of May and June as they're wrapping up some of the street sweeping and other activities that they're doing. As part of winter cleanup, this will be taking place as well. So it will be before the summer really starts.
All right, thank you.
Council Lowry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to talk a little bit, and I'd probably be through you to Mr. Bakey, the home-based rental assistance program, line F. I was talking to the Lowell Sun yesterday, and actually today, on the recent removal of the camps on the other side of the river. And I know the mayor does have a motion in tonight, and they asked me if I'd planned to follow up, and I didn't really plan to follow up for another 2 or 3 weeks, because my idea is they would go from one camp to the other, and after we do these 3, we'll be moving on. But in the packet this week, we did receive some information on a city program called the Home Tenant-Based Rental Assistance Program for Unsheltered Homeless. And I wonder if we could just talk about that a little bit or hear about that. And I know the letter was from Mr. Bakey.
Good evening. Thank you, Councilor. Yeah, we're actually pleased to be in a position where we can offer this program. In conjunction with the efforts that the property owners and the various homeless service providers, as well as the city, have been doing to address some of the camps that the council raised significant concerns about a few weeks ago, there's obviously an interest in what happens to the individuals that are impacted by that effort. And the CTI was able to dedicate a comparatively small amount of money from their funds to address sort of immediate housing startup costs to move a lot of those individuals into housing. Complementing that, we have been able to identify funding through the federal home program, which is one of the block grant programs the city receives, where we are in the process of establishing a tenant-based rental assistance program that would be available for the unsheltered homeless to move them into housing. And as I think the council is well aware, the 2 primary focuses of the 10-year plan on homelessness that we're in the process now of implementing are really to shift our focus to simultaneously focus on homelessness prevention and also housing for the homeless as the solutions, the long-term solutions to the homeless issues. And over the past 5 or 6 years, we have steadily and significantly invested in homelessness prevention. We have also worked very closely with a number of both for-profit and nonprofit developers of housing to create, I think at this point we're up to nearly 70 units of housing that are dedicated for people who are coming out of homelessness. What has been missing from the package is assistance that goes directly to the individuals to assist them in paying for housing and sort of get themselves up and running. That's the program that we're now developing. The funding level that's been identified for the initial 2 years should accommodate at least 10 individuals. That's based on the sort of the dollar amount that the service providers informed us would likely be needed per month per individual. But it's quite likely that there may be some opportunity to, using the same amount of money, actually reach a greater number of folks, both because there may be opportunities where two individuals may want to jointly obtain a housing unit that may be cheaper than the sum of what they would each pay individually, as well as the possibility or the likelihood many of the folks, even the folks who've been sheltered in some of these camps, do have some income and they have some ability to pay a little bit. So we could complement that or supplement that to enable them to pay for housing using this program. So we believe that, again, the CTI funds have already been used, I think, for 4 of the 7 individuals that they've been working with to help move them into housing in the immediate term. This money will actually allow up to 2 years of assistance, which will allow them to continue going forward and hopefully over that time achieve a level of fiscal sustainability for themselves to the point where they won't necessarily need a continued program of this sort. But the program, we hope that we'll be able to continue this program on an annual basis as long as it's necessary to help hopefully prevent us from running into a similar problem in the future with the camps, because we'll have this alternative available to help people.
Thank you. And I want to thank the administration. When I put the motion in, it was for medical care and housing for the individuals. And, there were some people in the city that attacked the idea right away that we were bulldozing the camps and really just throwing people out. And that was a real misconception. What it was 7 days they were given, and the outreach workers, from my understanding, went down, and now we see that some people have received medical attention, some people are getting housing. And I suspected from the start that as we remove those camps, some people will go to other camps, which will give the outreach workers who go down again a second opportunity to talk to them. But all in all, I'd like to say, I didn't call for a report right away. Personally, I hadn't, because I think this is going to be a process over several weeks. But I do want to thank the administration. I'm hearing some people did get medical assistance, and as we can see now, another housing program from the city is being developed, and that was the intent of the motion, and it seems to be the intent that the city's going through at this purpose at the present time. So I just want to say thank you.
Any further discussion? Councilor Elliott.
Thank you. So, Mr. Manager, how many individuals were living at these 3 locations?
Still waiting for the final report on that, or a report on that. We're pulling together some information on that today. I know that right now 7 people have been identified as having found home, been placed, or in the process of getting homes, and we're trying to get a full count on all of the numbers. That will all be included in a report that will be provided to the council.
So, so there were 7 just at one camp? We're looking at 3 camps, correct?
Right, we're looking at 3 camps, and the 7 is the number that I believe of total that have either taken advantage of resources that are available or have identified to us that they've moved in with a relative or are taking or found some other housing, and they're working with the agencies that deal with the homelessness issue.
Okay, so where did the rest of them go?
Well, some aren't reporting at
I have
all.
a motion on, but
Some aren't reporting at all. It does tie into the motion, the report that we'll be putting together in response to the mayor's motion. But it will, some have probably moved to other camps. Some have moved out of the city. Some, I'm sure, have gone to live with relatives and just aren't reporting that to us.
Right.
So we may not have a total answer, of every single person was living in those camps that has moved on. But we're going to try to get the best information we can. As Councilor Laurie indicated, we met with all of the different agencies, as well as the affected property owners. We developed a strategy of sending the outreach workers out, putting some resources in place to assist the individuals. It was a very clear message from myself that we wanted this done in a respectful way and helpful way, that we didn't want to make the mistake that had occurred in the past here as well as other locations where simply people went in and said, you have to leave and move on. We wanted this done over a period of time to give people an opportunity to find other sites to live, other places to live. We wanted to provide assistance. We wanted to provide the ability for their belongings to be handled properly. So we, based upon that initial meeting, there were follow-up meetings that took place over a period of time, but we gave the outreach workers the message to go out and give people 7 days notice that we were going to be coming in. We actually, when all was said and done, it was close to 8 or 9 days that we finally gave the individuals that were living there an opportunity to find some other arrangements. And again, we'll be doing follow-up and then moving on to all the camps that we know exist, and again, providing that same level of assistance. Because our interest here is to really protect the individuals and help the individuals. It isn't the conditions that many of them were living in, the medical issues that they were dealing with, the public safety issues that the city was dealing with. It just wasn't a good, safe environment for these individuals. We were looking to help them as much as to enforce the city ordinances regarding these types of camps.
No, I think that's all good. And I think that's why Councilor Laurie filed that motion. This information would have been good to know before there were 3 front-page stories in the newspaper, Mr. Manager. I know I specifically asked for it here. Just give us a plan before you go in and find assistance for people. It really would have been good to know, because you have seen the emails to all of us, or in some cases just some of us, saying, how can we be doing this? But there was a plan, and the mayor has a motion on. I thought we made it clear before anything takes place, just let us know exactly what you're going to do, and let the public know what's going to take place, because we did not want, none of us wanted to be perceived as we're we're heartless, or we don't care. Of course we do, but there are rules. I know there are rules or regulations that need to be followed. So, I'm disappointed we didn't get this. Strategy, you set up meetings, you are identifying resources. Those are all very good things. The way to handle it, it would have been, it would have been good to have this, which was the motion that was approved that night, before we, at least for me, before these, 3 front-page articles came through. So, well, I guess we'll be talking about this more under the next motion.
Councilor Laurie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just let me close out. The question has come why I filed this motion, and a lot of it was constituent-driven, and the concern for the people at the camps, the concern of the area, and so on and so forth. But, I look back, and I've said to some people, and this was put to me by some constituents, as I thought about filing this motion. The responsibility of the city as an elected official, administration, what would have happened if someone was murdered at one of those camps? First question, why didn't the city do something about it? Say there was a fire at that camp, 2 or 3 people died in a fire in a tent. Next question, why didn't the city do anything about it? There's public safety issues. Though a lot of the people at those camps were more susceptible to crime than any of us, for for people going down and hurting them. You know, and the motion called, and, you know, as I thought about filing the motion, it wasn't just to get rid of the camps, and it was concern of the public safety of the individuals living there also, and what the city should do. And so the motion did call for medical attention housing, and but that's why I filed the motion. And in closing, I want to thank the administration once again, as Councilor Elliott said. You know, this was done in a very compassionate way. Time was given. I know I tried to report yesterday, medical attention is being received by some. Housing, now we have a housing program. So as we move forward, I think I just want to congratulate the administration. I think you handled it in a great way. And I think that the city met its responsibility towards the people in those camps themselves. Thank you.
Any further discussion on the communications? Councilman Mendoza.
Yes, we received an update regarding the summer recreation programs that are being put together. And it certainly seems to be like it's going to be better and bigger than ever. There's 4 new locations so that everywhere in the city will have something going on. We have an estimated 300 additional children will be served, and it says 62 new summer employees. So certainly that's a lot more opportunities. It doesn't say how many other employees we've already had in the past, so I wasn't sure what the total of summer employees. I don't know if the manager through the mayor has that. Or
I don't have that right off the top of my head, Councilor. I know that the additional cost with the program that we're putting in place this year is in the vicinity of about $120,000 more this year. So we're fine-tuning that as we get into the budget, but we are ramping up quite a bit to these different locations and trying to coordinate more with the school department in these programs.
And of course, what originally led to this was that originally, and probably still is, some uncertainty of funding until we actually approve a budget for the next fiscal year. If the manager will speak, has any of that uncertainty lessened or still the same?
Well, there's still uncertainty. We've got some. Every day brings a little good news and a little bad news. We're waiting to see what happens with the Senate budget tomorrow. The biggest issue that we're facing, as we've indicated, is the charter school funding that we receive from the state. We have a large increase in the charter school assessment this year, but the state and the state is funding less of the charter school reimbursement. So last year they funded at about 90% of the required amount at the state level. The governor, I believe, was in the vicinity of 70% in his budget, and I believe the House has passed something closer to 60% of the amount. So in our case, it's $2.8 million that is the net loss that we have for the charter schools this year. And the total state, just to put that into perspective, the total unfunded amount of charter school reimbursement in the state this year is $30 million. The city of Lowell represents about 10% of that. $2.8 million is the hit that we're going to take as a result of the not fully funding the charter school reimbursement program. So that obviously had a very major impact on our budget projections that we're working on, and that threw us quite a curve. But we're working through that, and we've got some good news that has come in that we'll be reporting out to the council as we finalize some of those numbers with regards to our solid waste program and some other savings that we see coming in that should help us cushion that somewhat. But it's and we're still moving forward to try to move forward with this recreation program as big as last year, plus what we've proposed this year with that extra $120,000 or so. So,
I'll certainly be meeting the need of our residents for summer programs much more than we have in recent memory. Now, you were mentioning about the Chapter 70, charter school reimbursement. We could probably live with what the governor had projected. What becomes problematic is the cut or not.
Well, it was tough with the governor's number two. I forget, maybe Mr. Moses remembers that. But it certainly got substantially worse with the House version. With the governor's version, do you recall? So it was 1 million with the governor and 1.8 million with the House version. So.
So 1
So we
million
would have been,
to
yes,
1.8.
we would have been much easier to cushion it with the governor's proposal. So the Senate is coming out tomorrow with their budget, and we're hopeful that we can, the Senate will look at it differently, and we'll be working with the Municipal Association, the City of Boston. City of Boston loses about $10 million of the $30 million. They take a $10 million hit. And so we're hopeful that, we'll be able to do something with that.
Well, hopefully, things will turn out well so that we can afford to fund this summer program, as people are expecting now.
At this point in time, it's our intention to come forward with funding for again, we may tweak it back a little bit, but it's our intention to move forward because it was well received last year. We think it's a very effective tool in dealing with a number of issues and something that the residents would like to see happen, whether they have children or not.
Thank you.
Councilor Noon and then Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor. I concur with Councilor Mendonca's that, a lot of parents will be very happy with the expansion of the summer recreations this year. My question to you is, where are we at with this step regarding reaching out to those parents in terms of the publicity?
I think we've indicated in here that we've been in touch. Commissioner Bellegarde has been reaching out and doing with the schools. We're looking at using the schools' direct dialing system to let people know about the recreation program. The commissioner has indicated that he's worked with the because I specifically asked him about working with the sports groups in the city, and he's indicated that they have been doing that. Unfortunately, some of the groups pulled their permits back in February, February, before it really got, he was able to complete the planning for the recreation program. But they are following up with those groups as well to get the word out. We're doing the we're doing the signage at the parks, and utilizing our website substantially to get that word out. So we're doing quite a bit more outreach this year than we did last year about the program.
So does parent have to go pre-registers, or they just go whenever they wanted to?
I believe there has to be some type of registration program so that they know how many are going to be at each facility. But any questions they have on that, people should contact the recreation office.
Is there a deadline to it, or just,
It's pretty open.
Open, thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Martin and then Councilor Kennedy.
I was going to ask how much of that charter school problem was Boston's. But I mean, that's some glimmer of hope for us, I think.
We're number 2.
Right.
They're 10, we're 2.8. I believe Worcester, Springfield is 3rd. And then it drops off. But it's 10 million, 2.8, then I think it drops down to about 1.8. But then there's a whole number of communities that are in like an $800,000 hit. So it's really almost every community is being hit by this.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just briefly, through you to the manager. I think you spoke about the Senate version a couple of weeks ago, and you were hopeful then. Have you had any communication with State Senator Donahue about the charter schools, or what are you expecting the Senate version to have in it?
I don't have a handle right now. I have been talking with Senator Donahue. In fact, she and I spoke today, and we gave her some more of the information. So I expect that, I am hopeful that the Senate may look at it differently. She I'm sure wants to know what the Senate Ways and Means people are doing with this, and that's what's coming out tomorrow.
Their budget comes out tomorrow.
Correct.
Councilor Lowry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Talking about the summer programs, I'd put the motion in last year and again this year to expand it. And I talked to Lyle about doing a program. Last year, we closed 2 camps. A lot of people, as the other councilors alluding, didn't know about it. And I asked Lyle what it would take to get it in the paper, and he said send a press release. So maybe if we could send a press release to the Lowell Sun. And a lot of people do read the paper, and at least they would know where the camps are, how to sign there. But if we could send a press release to the Sun on the programs. Thank you.
Yeah. Or you could pay attention during the meetings. Any further discussion? Entertain a motion to accept and place on file. So moved by Councilor Lowry, seconded by Councilor Mendonça. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed? So voted. Being after 7 o'clock, we have general public hearings. First one scheduled for 7 p.m. An ordinance to create the new position and salary for IT System Support Technician for the library. Motion to waive the full reading by Councilor Noon, seconded by Councilor Martin. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? So voted. Reading by title in City Council ordinance. An ordinance creating one new position of IT System Support Technician and establishing the salary at the Pollard Memorial Library. At this point, I'd open it up for those wishing to speak in favor. Excuse me, Mr. Manager, before we open it up?
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just by way of explanation, as we all know, the libraries have become a bit different than the libraries that many of us, or at least I, experienced as a young man. That they are much more technological, I guess is the best way to put it, in terms of the resources that they have available with the use of computers and the internet and the technology that's out there now. That it's changed the way people use libraries, and most of the activity that we see taking place now at the Pollard and at our satellite at the Senior Center is based on computers. And so that's put a tremendous amount of demand on our library for maintaining our technology, hardware and software. We are part of a consortium, the Merrimack Valley Library Consortium. It's a separate network than the city's network, and it has quite a bit more of information and the ability to use the regional resources that the entire consortium has. This position does not increase the head count at the library, but it does allow us to have the resources, dedicate the resources to a position that will make us better in terms of the library services we provide. The library director, Victoria Woodley, is here tonight to answer any questions that people may have regarding this. But again, it's in terms of headcount and in terms of salary, this is within the financial framework of the library system.
Thank you. At this point, we'd open it up for those wishing to speak in favor. In favor? Please state your name and address for the record.
Victoria Woodley, the library director. I don't have too much more to say beyond what City Manager Lynch said, but I do have perhaps numbers that we have 80 computers, not all of them people sit at, but some of them run other devices between our 2 locations. And out of all of those, only 2 of those are on the city's network, so we have 3 other networks to deal with. And so far, we've been trying to do it ourselves. We have a position of coordinator who's responsible for library automation, which is all the computers. And with the help sometimes of the computer department here in the city, and also an IT person that works for the consortium that's shared by 36 libraries. And the problem with that is that they come when they can, but they're not as familiar with all the equipment and the software as somebody who does the job day in and day out. And that's what we really need. And libraries all over are starting to see that that was a position they need funded. And I can tell the libraries in our consortium that do have 1 or 2 positions to do this are in much better shape with their computers than the rest of us who are hoping that somebody will come along and do this for us and do that, because we don't have the specialized knowledge. I know that people that are going through library school today are learning a lot more, and just being in this world, you have to learn how to use computers, but not quite the specialized skills that I'm looking for. I need somebody who really understands networks and all these computers and can give us advice as to how we need to go on in the future to make our library very effective. Because people expect more. They expect a Wi-Fi that works well. They expect computers that work well. They expect new software, and I think we can do that within our budget. Let's see. I think that's about any. Do you have questions that you want to ask me about?
Before we get to questions, we're still in the public hearing.
Okay.
So if there are any others who wish to speak in favor? In favor? Seeing none, that portion of the public hearing is closed. Anyone wishing to speak in opposition? In opposition? In opposition, seeing none, that portion of the public hearing is closed. What's the wish of the council? Councilor Mercia? Okay. Councilor Elliott?
Thank you. Mr. Manager, we do have an MIS department. I know the Councilman Mercer started asking the questions a couple of weeks ago when this was put on. Why are we adding another position? I mean, we just heard at the Public Safety Subcommittee meeting this week, the neighborhood leaders, they want more police officers on the street. We know we need more building inspectors. I understand, resources. We just heard from you that we're looking at, charter school, like big charter school increases in cost. We're trying to hold the line on taxes this year. I don't doubt there's perhaps a need at the library for this, but we also know there are a number of positions of library assistants that are not filled, as Councilman Mercier raised last week. So I understand there is a need. There is a need. There's always a need for so many things, but my concern is all the other items that I just mentioned, and yet, there's so many other priorities. We just have a discussion about sidewalks and et cetera, that this seems to me that it just shouldn't, there's so many other priorities that we need to meet before this. And secondly, why can't our MIS department, address, these issues?
Well, I think that a couple of points. I think that the MIS department has their hands full with all the technology that we have here at City Hall, and the support they provide to the school department, the support they provide to police and fire. They maintain our website, which in and of itself is a very time-consuming task. The library computer equipment, particularly the network that they operate under, is is separate from the city's network and has different needs and requirements. So I think that for effectiveness, and the hardware needs are more immediate. Oftentimes, work orders that we put in place here for computer support is less demanding. Oftentimes, it's time sensitive in many cases, but people can find other ways to work around their issues here. When you have a patron over at the library that's trying to get something and the computer isn't working or the printer isn't working or whatever the case may be, and everything else is backed up, you want to be able to respond quickly to those needs. So I think in terms of service delivery, we'd like to have someone on staff to do that. In terms of the other needs that we have, I do think that we need to have a balance of services in the city, and we can't just let the library go without being effective for its users. But beyond that, this isn't a case where it's a trade-off of whether we fill this position or hire a police officer or hire an inspector or build a sidewalk. We're required under the state laws and regulations to fund the library at a certain level. This is not going beyond that. We're still funding just at the minimum level. In fact, from a we did some work on this recently. From a comparative standpoint, we're one of the lowest funded libraries in the Commonwealth on several different levels. But this is funding, so this is just basically swapping out one position for another position. This is something that's more specialized and more effective for what we need to do in the library than the other positions that we have. So we wouldn't fill a library assistant position, but instead we would fill this position.
Got it. Okay. That's good to know. I appreciate the answer, and that, it's just a swap off.
But I think, if I
Thank
may,
you.
Counselor, I think the questions were well put to address that.
Thank you. Councilor Martin and Councilor Kennedy.
Yeah, that was my question. I think either your comments or Ms. Woodley's comments that this was going to be done within the original library budget. So, and you're right, I was going to raise the point about, we need to maintain a certain level of funding for accreditation purposes, or we lose state funding. So if this is the judgment of the director that this position is a better use of the resources available, then I'd certainly support that judgment and move we approve this.
A motion by Councilor Martin, seconded by Councilor Noon. On the motion, Councilor Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the manager. I don't, I think it's good to have this position over at the library. My question's a little bit different. It's a 35-hour position. The salary seems extremely low to me for this type of position. And I would wonder how you came about, why do you think that you can attract quality candidates at this type of salary?
Well, that's a good question as well. We think that this is probably a bit on the low side, but we're hopeful that we will be able to fill this with someone that has. They may not have as much experience as some of the higher level IT people that one might hire, but technology itself is becoming a little bit more, the pricing on positions in this area have gone down somewhat as more people have become familiar with technology and can utilize the technology. There are a number of younger people out there that are more familiar with software and hardware issues that can find their way around the computer systems than it used to be.
I understand that.
So it's a good entry-level position for someone.
Yeah, I think it's a good entry-level position for someone as well, but I think also that probably most salaries for entry-level positions are greater than what we're offering even at the high end. And I think there's a similar position over in the school department that pays substantially more to do roughly the same thing. Now, granted, this is just the library instead of the whole school system, but nevertheless, the expertise that will be required at both positions is the same. And I just question whether or not, how did you make the decision that you would be able to hire somebody at this salary level?
I think it's largely a function of how much money we have available.
Okay, so we'll just see how it goes and see what we can get, and if not, then probably you'll be back to us looking for a salary increase in this position.
Or doing something different, right?
Or maybe, does it need to be 35 hours?
It doesn't need to be, probably. We could probably look at something a little bit different, but obviously one of my arguments for it is that we want the coverage. And so we'll have this during the peak periods, probably the people are there. But you want to have people there to be able to help the public if there are issues that arise. So 35 is...
Right, what you need.
Right.
Okay. All right, well, we'll see how it goes, I guess. Thanks. Thank you.
Hopefully candidates aren't watching this and wanting to negotiate a new thing. Councilor Mendonça, and then Councilor Leahy.
Hey, yes, I was on a television program this morning, so this question
Twice in
comes-
2 days.
So the question was, that I was requested to ask is, how many MIS-type people we have in the different departments, through the mayor to the manager, some rough.
Excluding the school department,
Okay,
I believe we have 6 positions in our IT department. We have 1 full-time position in the police department. It used to be 2. And I believe there are part-time only in the fire department, and that's the extent of it. The school department has their own staff. I know the Career Center employs people on their staff as well.
yeah, well, the Career Center is, although it's in our budget, is somewhat separate. They have their own funding sources, which is fine. I mean, initially, when you start to think about, could there be more flexibility if these were all in MIS rather than sent out? Now, you mentioned a part-time in the fire department. Is that just a part-time, or part-time that and part-time something else in the fire department?
No, that's just part-time.
Just a part-time employee?
And I do want to say, we're a fairly sophisticated user of technology. As the manager said, we had the website. Increasingly, we have more and more e-commerce going on, electronic payments. We're trying to force, or not force, but encourage use of the technology for not only payments, but also for applying for permits and exchanging information. And, we're a $300 million organization. I would say that there aren't too many $300 million organizations with fewer than 10 IT people.
I don't disagree, but some of this is just like, if we centralize they might be more flexible in where they utilize a specific time, where whenever you have a dedicated staff in a particular department, when they complete their duties, they just tend to be assigned something else other than technology probably to do, whereas if they were in IT, they might fill in a gap that, like the library, that may need this staff. Now, after I heard that the position is not an increase in headcount, they're giving something up to get this, so I agree with Councilor Martin in the sense that they're choosing how to utilize their resources, and in that case, I can be supportive, whereas I was becoming concerned that we're adding an additional headcount at a time where we have some uncertainty, as we spoke just earlier, regarding our city finances because of the charter school reimbursement numbers could leave us in the deficit the way that it is right now. And so I was concerned. I'm going to go ahead and support this because it's not a change in headcount. If I could ask, though, what kind of position is being eliminated in order to create this?
A library assistant position.
A library assistant?
Right, that's more of a clerical function, and obviously this is more technical. And if I may, one of the positions that's included in the headcount that Mr. Moses just described is, for instance, a GIS person. That's a very specialized technology area. The web is a very specialized technology area for us, maintaining that on a regular basis. And then all of the other applications that we have in the overall system. And our IT people will still be involved with the library. They won't be involved in sort of the necessarily the day-to-day sort of dealing with problems that might arise on an immediate basis. And there'll be specialization here of the individual working with other members of the consortium on software applications that are library specific. Likewise, police and fire have very law enforcement or fire protection specialization of software that they, not only are they simply supporting the software, they're utilizing the software and doing that type of work. In the case of the police department, for instance, the one person we have, it's a as you would imagine, a very a full-time job maintaining the technology that's within the and hardware and software within the police station and the communications equipment, but also all of the software and hardware that's in the cruisers. and the rollout of mobile technology that the police have been utilizing and really have been recognized nationally for the applications that they've put in place.
Yeah, well, the applications can be specific, but things like networking and installations generally are common amongst these different.
And that still takes place. Police still works with our IT people. Library will still work with our IT people here, but it's more the applications, and then in the case of the library, the customer relations of working with people on any hardware issues that arise.
And you also have to weigh into the factor of how much the technology costs. Because sometimes it's easier and less costly to replace than it is to try and maintain it, especially now that they're sub $1,000 per unit. So that's always something to consider, because something I was thinking of is for the cost of the 72 some computers over 3 years, that costs less to replace them all than to hire one person. But again, since it's inside the head count, and that's how they want to utilize the resources they have, I will support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Leahy, then Lori.
My questions were answered. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Lori.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One of my questions was answered with a question by Councilor Elliott. I know we have an IT system team, and now I have a question for the library. If we do hire this individual, will we be able to expand our services to the public? For example, I go down and use the library, I pull out books. Would we be able to put more books online? Would people who might have a hard time seeing be able to access the library and get those tapes over the computer or over a phone?
Well, we actually already have that. So we have downloadable books available to people already. What I think this technician will also help us do is we spend an awful lot of time, the way the library is configured, most of the computers for adults are on the second floor, which is also the reference room. Spend most of our time telling people how to use computers. And we could probably, and really not as many questions about books and things in the library. So we could probably make better use of our time if this person also spent part of his time working with people at the in the room, saying this is how you do this is how you do that. I don't know if he's going to bring too many new resources, but I have found that when I looked at the kind of work that people in comparable jobs are doing in other libraries, they come up with ideas that will make things easier for us that we as non-specialists had no idea could happen. And that's what I'm looking for, plus a person to give me advice on, technology. And I absolutely agree with you about buying, I'm going to lease computers so that you change them out every 3 years, because if you run them into the ground, they start to fall apart, and it's a real big mess. So yeah, we are definitely looking into leasing numbers of computers as we're replacing them. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Move the question.
Thank you. Councilor Noon had a comment.
Thank you, Mayor. And that's what I thought, that the comment that Ms. Woodley we just spoke of, because I was going to ask, I was curious to see how often, the directors of library and or the staff ran into technology question, and that's probably the reason why she chose a IT person over the assistant library. I think this certainly is going to be better serve the public, those who come in to use the computer in the library. We have 80 computers, only 2 is on the city network, so this certainly is going to be a great help. Questions to the managers going forward. I was hoping that, going forward in the future, that you probably want to have a department, IT, the IMS department itself, and that will, operate it like any other department, and for the city, for the police, and for whatever, and then they can assign their staff and to address that issue. That way, probably, I think you have, as Councilor Mendonça indicated, a centralized IT that is answer all the questions involving the city technology. So think about it. So thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilor Mendonça.
Yes.
Councilor Mercia.
Yes.
Mayor Murphy.
Yes.
Councilor Nguyen.
Yes.
Councilor Elliott.
Yes.
Councilor Kennedy.
Yes.
Councilor Leahy.
Yes.
Councilor Laurie.
Yes.
Councilor Martin.
Yes.
9 yeas.
Thank you. Next, we have a utility public hearing for UMass Lowell to attach a new cable on existing poles in the right-of-way along Hall Street and across Aiken Street. Entertain a motion to waive the full reading by Councilor Mendonça, second by Councilor Noon. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? So voted. Entertain a motion then to refer to the wire inspector for report. Excuse me. At this time, we'd open it up for those wishing to speak in favor. In favor? Seeing none, that portion of the public hearing is closed. Open it up for those wishing to speak in opposition. In opposition. Seeing none, that portion of the public hearing is closed. Entertain a motion then to refer to the wire inspector for report and recommendation. So moved by Councilor Mercia, second by Councilor Noon. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? So voted. Next, we have a communication from the city manager, presentation of findings of Wood Street and Rourke Bridge study conducted by NEMCOG and the VHB. Mr. Manager?
I'm going to immediately turn it over to a representative from Vanessa Hagen-Breslin and Beverly Woods from Northern Middlesex Council of Governments to make the presentation. We have it set up on the screens here.
Good evening. I'm Beverly Woods, the Director at Northern Middlesex Council of Governments. And we've requested some time before you this evening to brief you on the status of our corridor study and feasibility analysis for the Rourke Bridge. And I know many of you have been to the public hearings that we've had. There have been 4 hearings so far. We're at the point in the study where we're looking to prepare the draft report and to put that out for public comment. And before doing that, we really wanted to talk about some of the bridge alignments that are being brought forward through the process and to get your feedback and your comments on what was out there now. There will be a 5th public meeting once the draft report is prepared to get additional comments on the report itself. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Laura Castelli from VHB, who's our consultant, and she's going to give you just a brief presentation on the study, where we are, and the recommendations that have come out of the process.
Thanks, Beverly. Hi, my name's Laura Castelli. I'm also joined tonight by Nicolette Hastings from VHB and Jody Tronfio from TEC and Associates. We've focused our presentation tonight really on the bridge alignments that we're recommending move forward into the Massachusetts and National Environmental Policy Acts, which is the NEPA permitting. That would be the next step of the project. But I also just wanted to point out we spent a significant amount of time kind of looking at the whole Lowell and Chelmsford area as a region and picking intersections and roadway corridors that can be improved in other ways, whether that's bicycle improvements or sidewalk improvements, pedestrian and transit connection improvements, and roadway improvements. And while I'm not focusing on that tonight, we do have a host of improvements that are being recommended that have state and city jurisdiction as well as the town of Chelmsford jurisdiction to move forward in the next 10 to 15 years. So the study doesn't focus just on the bridge, but in the interest of time and curiosity, certainly the bridge has gotten the most coverage. So that's what I'm going to be focusing on tonight. Maybe.
We have an IT technician here to...
And I've used this system before, so I know that it works. It vibrated when I turned it on. Let's try again. Oh. Let me grab the mouse. So this is just a brief agenda. I'm going to be summarizing the detailed analysis that we did and talking just briefly before that on all of the alternatives that we looked at. I'll talk about next steps and then I'll open it up for questions and discussion. This graphic shows alignments that were developed in 1975 and 1985 in previous NEPA, which is the National Environmental Policy Act documentation. We started with these were all eliminated from consideration 30 and 35 years ago. But we started with these because they formed a good basis of discussion, and they were things that people were thinking about back then. And we wanted to make sure that we felt that the reasons why they were dismissed were sound. As you can see, they cut through a lot of Lowell and Dracut and Chelmsford. The area is significantly more developed now than it was in the 70s and 80s. There are significant property impacts, impacts to cemeteries, impacts to schools, and impacts to businesses associated with all of these alternatives. There are also a lot of construction issues associated with connecting them directly to Route 3, in that if you're connecting to Route 3, you need to have a mile spacing between interchanges. So there would need to be major reconstruction of that route or of the interchange at Drum Hill in order to accommodate new roads being connected to Route 3. The one part that we looked at a little further in detail this time is the connection up north all the way to Dracut. And we looked at that because while there are significant environmental impacts associated with that alternative, there are not a lot of property impacts and impacts to homes. So we wanted to take a look at whether or not the transportation benefit of making that northerly connection would offset the environmental impacts. And there's actually just a small transportation benefit on the order of 400 cars a day that would really be attracted to that route. It didn't take traffic out of downtown Lowell. It didn't take traffic out of any of the bottleneck areas that exist today. So we're actually not recommending moving forward with a limited access highway that connects that far to the north. Thank you. Well, what we came up with were 9 new alternatives that are all generally in the vicinity of the existing Rourke Bridge, although they do travel further to the north. The first one that we looked at is a no-build. What happens if the bridge comes down and you do nothing? And you basically displace 27,000 cars a day, and they really don't have any other means of crossing the river in an uncongested location. So that was an alternative that was dismissed. Another alternative that was dismissed was maintaining the existing alignment, so building the bridge right exactly over where it is today. And because of construction management and phasing, and again, that displacement of traffic and not being able to maintain it during construction, that alternative was dismissed. We looked at an eastern bypass alignment and an eastern relocation alignment, which is putting the bridge either just to the east of the existing Rourke Bridge or closer to the School Street Bridge. And both of those were eliminated due to state park impacts on the north side of the river, or connectivity impacts along the south side of the river and community impacts with those neighborhoods. And then the last one that we dismissed right off the bat was a dual river crossing, so keeping the Rourke Bridge where it is today, maintaining it in some fashion so that it can last, for the next several years, or in perpetuity, reconstructing it as a new bridge and putting a second bridge further north up the river in Chelmsford. And because of constructability and maintenance of the existing bridge and those issues, that was all also dismissed. So the ones that have been maintained are what we're calling 2, 4, 5, and 6, which are all in the existing vicinity of the Rourke Bridge, and we're going to get into those in detail. And then 7, which was what was known as the Vinyl Square alignment. It connected Wedgwood Circle on the north side in Lowell with Vinyl Square on the south side in Chelmsford. We did look at that in the same amount of detail that we're going to go over the other alternatives tonight. However, once we looked at it in that level of detail, we saw the significance of the environmental impacts, and I have a slide I'll show you in a minute. They're 5-fold of what they are in the existing Rourke Bridge area. So for those reasons, you do lose a little bit of a transportation mobility improvement as you move the river crossing further and further away from Lowell, and there were some constructability impacts to that as well. So that ultimately was eliminated from consideration, and we're not going to be spending much time discussing it tonight, and you can see that on the left of the screen in the purple. That's alternative 7. But what I really want to focus on our attention this evening is on the other 4 locations that are kind of just to the west of the existing Rourke Bridge river crossing. I do have a matrix handout for you tonight that I'll pass out at the end that is kind of the nitty-gritty details of all the detailed alternatives analysis that we're going to go over. I'm going to touch on the transportation and environmental considerations, and then I'm going to let Jody speak about the structural assessment that was done and the constructability. For all of the 4 alternatives that are in the vicinity of the existing bridge, they have very similar transportation and mobility characteristics among the alternatives. Emergency access and mobility are improved. The bridge would be 4 lanes as opposed to 2. There would be sidewalks on both sides. There would be bike lanes on both sides. So it is a wider bridge. It facilitates traffic better. But having that width, while there will still be some queuing at each intersection during the peak hours as you're making your way over the bridge, having that additional width really helps to aid with emergency vehicle response times during the peak commuting hours. And alternatives 5 and 6, which we'll get into more detail, because they connect directly to Old Ferry Road and not to Pawtucket Boulevard, they help move traffic away from the Pawtucketville neighborhood that's immediately next to the bowling alley. What we heard a lot and what I saw being out in the field is that people actually take a left off the Rourke Bridge, they turn into the bowling alley parking lot, and then they go through the neighborhood to make their connections to Varnum Street. So by moving the bridge further away from that, you're easing traffic out of that neighborhood and putting it on the main roads. We put together a slide that shows traffic shifts. There is an increase of traffic on the Rourke Bridge in the morning and evening by 2035, which is our design year. And that increase is due to the fact that the bridge is a little bit wider, so it's attracting more traffic. And it's not attracting new traffic. What it's doing is it's taking traffic off of the O'Donnell or the School Street Bridge, which is over congested as well today. And it's putting it back on the Rourke Bridge, which is a better travel pattern for people that are using the bridge. So if you think about these numbers in a graphic, essentially what's happening is the travel pattern is changing to go over the Rourke Bridge and use Pawtucket Boulevard, which today what they do to avoid the Rourke Bridge is they use Pawtucket Street on the south side, and then they go over the School Street Bridge. And what we heard at the public meetings was that while the bridge is safe and while MassDOT is maintaining it and making sure that it's structurally sound, people are a little afraid to go over it because it is rickety, and if you sit on it, it does bounce up and down. It makes a lot of noise. So they're diverting over to the School Street Bridge, and this just helps bring them back. We didn't see wide-scale traffic increases on any of the other neighborhood roadways. From an environmental standpoint, we are crossing a river, so there will be a detailed environmental analysis that has to happen. All of the alternatives have impacts to floodplain and impacts to wetlands. I've shown this graphic here that kind of shows where the impacts are. The area that you see in green are the wetland areas. And that is the most significant environmental impact that we've found that will have to be, the Conservation Commission would deny our permit for the new bridge because of the wetlands impacts and would have to go through the DEP process of getting a variance for wetland impacts. There are also rare habitat and rare species impacts. It's predominantly a type of dragonfly. We have generalized square footage or types of species in our matrix that I'll leave with you, but the more detailed information would be ferreted out in the environmental permitting. And then this was the graphic that I was showing you, what I was talking about earlier. The one on the right, alternative 7, that's the vinyl square alignment, and you can see the difference in level of impact between the different environmental constraints and why that was eliminated from consideration. I'm going to pass it to Jody to talk about structures.
If I could, before we move into that segment, Councilor Mercy had a question.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. If you could go back to the point where you're saying right here. Now, there was an alternate whatever it was, 2 or something, whereby you take the structure down and put a new one right in the same footprint. And I'm against that, and so are probably a lot of people, because they don't want to deter traffic and reroute it to congest the other areas.
Correct.
And I can understand that, but when you look at the diagram right here, doesn't it look like no matter which route you take, you're still coming on the same footprint in the beginning? So how is that portion in the front going to affect
On the south side,
Right, the side probably by the Edward Street soccer field, is that?
we have a lot more flexibility on the north side of the river in terms of moving the landing to a place that is better suited. On the south side of the river, it's very difficult to do because there's properties on either side immediately adjacent to Middlesex Street. There's the CVS on the northwest corner, and then the new Walgreens, and then the charter school is also going to be right there. So there's not a lot of wiggle room, for lack of a better term, on the south side. What we've done, there's also a significant impact to properties associated with widening Wood Street to 4 lanes. What we've done, and I have them at the end of the presentation in case this question came up, we've developed some concepts for how you can improve that intersection and still keep it in the same place. There are significant property impacts to the Market Basket shopping plaza, the parking associated with that, and some small property impacts to CVS, which really doesn't affect their operations. So those would need to be looked at in more detail if that was a direction that folks wanted to head in the future. The construction itself would be part of the DOT project, but any land acquisition that had to happen or any property impacts, those fall on the city to do. So a charge of ours, and the cost also falls on the city, so a charge of ours was to limit all of the property impacts to the extent that is possible, to limit the cost to the city of construction.
So this, where it comes in to be the same, that's on the south side, which would be CVS side?
Yes.
Okay, so would we have any congestion there while we're constructing the bridge? No matter which way it goes, we're coming into the same footprint at that point, aren't we?
Yes, for construction staging, there would be some
And you don't know the time frame of fixing that, right?
No. My understanding is that there is Transportation Improvement Program money for the environmental permitting related to the bridge, but there haven't been any construction funds allocated yet, so I don't have a time frame.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Martin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple of questions. All the alternatives of 4-lane, did you look at more than 4-lane, like 6?
Yes.
3 each way? And why weren't any of those included in one of the final?
We actually looked at 2, 4, 6, and 8 lanes. The 2-lane is what's there today. I think folks recognize the issues with maintaining a 2-lane structure. There are a lot of logistical issues with federal highway funding a 2-lane structure when the traffic volumes call for something greater. For the 6-lane and the 8-lane structure, it's kind of twofold. So when we did our traffic projections, we looked forward to 2035, which is consistent with state and federal guidance, to project traffic for all known projects, transportation improvements, developments that are going in, to see what that planning horizon traffic volume would be and what kind of cross-section would be needed to support it. And what we saw was that a 4-lane section is sufficient to accommodate the traffic demands through 2035 and beyond, which is one reason why we're not recommending 6 lanes or 8 lanes. The other reason why we're not recommending them is that is a fairly large structure. It's significant cost increase over what Jody's about to present. And even if we could widen Wood Street to 4 lanes and go beyond those property impacts and be able to work with Market Basket and others to do that, you would still have twice as much capacity on your bridge as you do on your local roadway network. And while it would be very easy to get over the bridge, there wouldn't really be anywhere to go once you got on either side of it.
And what's the federal trigger for NEPA review? Is it funding?
It's usually funding. It's a combination of funding, environmental impacts. The University Ave Bridge did not need to go through the NEPA policy because they were able to go in as what is called a footprint roads project, which basically means they don't get any bigger, they don't add any capacity. But even just adding sidewalks and bicycle lanes to this bridge, which DOT would require, would probably be enough to trip the NEPA process.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Councilor Laurie?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Regardless how wide the bridge is, coming to the south side, Wood Street, it really wouldn't matter because the traffic's going to be congested on Wood Street. And the other thing with 6 to 8, would there be an impact on the recreational impact on the river?
With all of the alternatives, we're actually making the distance between the spans in the river wider, which I think Jody has some graphics that he'll show you
Good,
when he
yeah.
talks about. So, actually, no matter how many lanes you have, we're improving the ability for recreation along the river. Because we're widening the span, so we're basically creating more space underneath.
And I serve on the committee at NEMCOG, and from the earliest days, the recreational facilities were part of the impact, because that's a clean river now, and a lot of boating, swimming, but, and I think that's come out at every meeting, whether you have 6, 8, no matter how many lanes you have, coming south, you still come into Wood Street.
Correct.
So the impact would be there.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion before we move on to the next part of the presentation? Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jody Trumpio with TEC, sub-consultant to VHB as part of the study. The structural evaluation criteria that we considered first and foremost is we needed to come up with a structure type that had an economical structure type that satisfied some of the requirements that Council Laurie was suggesting in terms of improved recreational use in the waterway. Arriving at a structure type that was something that MassDOT would perceive as something that they would generally like in terms of structural redundancy, ease of inspection. Not necessarily a structure type that would be ultimately designed, but one that we could use to compare each of these alternatives on a case-by-case basis. Secondly, we took a look at property impacts. Aside from the alternative to all of these alignments, we're going to touch down on new land that where a bridge doesn't exist today, and what does that mean in terms of what types of property we're going to be impacted. Constructability, coming up with a buildable solution. Are there any access limitations associated with the area around the Rourke Bridge today? And lastly, taking a look at programmatic construction costs. So what that meant in terms of $2025 or year 2035 in terms of what we can use for historical data today, recent bid data from the university average, and trying to escalate those costs and trying to predict what the bones or the actual structural costs for the bridge could potentially be for each of these alternatives. So first and foremost, this graph represents some of the viable alternatives for structure type for a given span. We wanted to improve the span that currently exists today of 150 feet, and we set a project goal of at least identifying doubling that span, if not approaching an upper limit of 400 feet. This graphic represents a couple of different alternatives: a concrete segmental bridge, a steel girder bridge, the cable-stayed bridge, which is kind of off the map in this case, which is synonymous with the Lenny-Zakin Bridge, a tied arch bridge, which is synonymous with the Tingsboro Bridge, which is upriver, which again is a little bit out of the area of what we were considering for a maximum span, and a steel truss bridge. There is no historical significance with the Rourke Bridge, therefore, similar to the University Ave Bridge, you don't have to necessarily use a truss bridge. So for the sake of this study, we went with a continuous steel girder bridge. Again, it's something that MassDOT likes to see. It's easy to inspect, easy to maintain. This is a representative perspective of what this structure type would look like. This is actually to scale that would represent a span of about 300, 350 feet, just to put it in some sort of perspective as far as what this structure type, for the basis of this study, would look like. So the other thing that we looked at was property and resource impacts. They come in the form of both temporary and permanent impacts. Temporary in the form of how do we build a bridge? We have access roads, construction access roads, barge docks. We're going to have to build the bridge off of barges, construction, putting cranes on barges to get out to the riverway to construct the bridges. And then also finding a place for material storage, material laydown. Where do the workers park? These types of areas are all need to be identified with each of these alternatives. The next thing in terms of permanent property impacts, as I mentioned before, this comes in the form of taking property, land acquisitions, whether there's a layout alteration with a state highway layout, or if there's permanent easements required for maintenance or the like. Constructability issues. As part of this project, we looked at the entire study area and the infrastructure health of the area. And, how are large construction vehicles going to be able to get to the job site, and what type of access limitations are there? All of us are familiar with the south side of the river. There's the railroad there that kind of prohibits any construction directly and access directly to the river from the south side. So, we see it as access coming to the north side. With the Route 3 corridor being recently constructed within the last 10, 15 years, all of those bridges along the corridor are not weight restricted. Therefore, heavy delivery trucks delivering steel, concrete, and the like can travel to the job site via the Route 3 corridor, come across the recently rehabilitated Tingsboro Bridge, and travel eastbound on the boulevard to the job site to the north. So now, before I get into each of the alignment alternatives that Laura has highlighted briefly, I wanted to just speak towards how we're developing these costs that you're going to see on each of these slides. As I mentioned, we took some historical data from looking at what University Ave Bridge was bid at, some of the representative costing from that, looking at Mass DOT has weighted average bid prices for certain materials. And this is a very scaled back or a very programmatic level for this type of work. So we're doing this on a cost per square foot basis. So essentially, the bigger the bridge, the more the cost. We're using that type of programming costing for this study. This is alternative 2, which is, as Laura mentioned, we are maintaining the existing alignment to some extent. There's going to be a slight shift to the west, and the reason why I say that, this alignment, along with all of the other alignments, as Laura had mentioned, we cannot displace the traffic that goes over the Rourke Bridge today. That traffic has to be maintained. That bridge has to be in service while the new bridge is being constructed. Therefore, we have to build this bridge in phases. The first phase is to build the bridge just to the west wide enough to accommodate the 2 lanes of traffic that are on the Rourke Bridge today, so that we could shift them over to the first half of the new bridge, take down the old bridge, build the second half. So what you see here in the graphic, there's a couple of shaded areas. The blue shaded areas represent the temporary property impacts that I was referring to. Construction access, cofferdams to construct the substructure units within the river, material laydown, actually constructing barge docks to get cranes out into the river. As you know, the north side of the river is very shallow for several feet before you're able to mobilize any heavy equipment into the river. So there's some need for some temporary structure to get actually out into the river to construct the bridges. The cost that's associated with this, again, is shown on the lower left-hand corner of the slide for each alternative. And again, this is based on programmatic costs per square foot projected in $20-25. This is a graphic to kind of represent what I'm talking about in terms of phase construction. The shaded portion to the right of the screen represents the cross-section of the Rourke Bridge today. And you can get a sense of what's there today in terms of 2 lanes, 11 feet wide, and what's being proposed, and the dramatic increase in bridge width to accommodate the traffic demand for 2035, and the need to actually build this in phases. You can see that the left portion of the bridge is wide enough to accommodate the right portion of the old bridge to allow for the phase construction to occur. Alternative 4 is a slight shift to the west. The only difference here is this bridge alignment is suggested because it eliminates the phase construction. This project also, with this shift in alignment to the west, has some property encroachment at the CVS parcel. What we're showing in red represents approach embankments, naturally graded slope embankments for the approaches as you ascend up and over the waterway. Those areas represent that. The property impacts could easily be corrected with the construction of vertical retaining walls as an alternative, and those costs are actually reflected because they're more costly in terms of the natural embankment, but we wanted to provide a graphic that gave you the visualization of the maximizing the property impacts, but at the same time maximizing the potential costs with each of the alternatives. Alternative 5 is a similar alignment with the exception that there's grade separation that carries the Rourke Bridge structure over the boulevard and touching down so that there's a direct connection to Old Ferry Road. Obviously, on the north side of the river, this requires a property acquisition of the old drive-in parcel. So there's a significant property impact associated with this alternative. There's a lot more structure with this alternative I think this is a 9-span structure, if I remember correctly, in terms of the 4 or 5-span structures with the previous alternatives. And there's dedicated off-ramps and on-ramps to get onto the bridge. So this alternative, there are benefits to creating, as Laura mentioned, reducing the cut-through traffic by having direct connection right to Old Ferry Road with this alignment. So there are benefits associated with this alternative. Yes. No, that represents future costs. Yes. Yes. No, but it's something that this is based on $2025. Yes. Yes, sure. Lastly, alternative 6 is what we're referring to as our skewed bypass alignment. Similar to alternative 5, as Laura had mentioned, this creates a direct connect to Old Ferry Road, which kind of improves the situation with reducing the cut-through traffic through the neighborhood. It is about a 25% increase in the overall span as compared to alternative number 2. And there are similar impacts associated on the south side with property impacts with a CVS parcel. But again, can be corrected with vertical retaining walls so that there is no encroachment on the private properties.
Council Lowry.
Would this alignment be the easiest to keep the Rourke Bridge up and have traffic going across the bridge as we go along?
Any of alignments 4, 5, or 6, they all are built far enough away from the existing Rourke Bridge to allow for single-phase construction and maintain traffic on the existing Rourke Bridge.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any further discussion before the presentation continues?
So in terms of next steps, NEMCOG's reviewing a draft of the report currently, and then there's going to be an internal review period. We have a study advisory committee and a technical working group made up of officials from the different cities and towns as well as DOT that are going to be taking some time to review the document. After that, we're going to have informational meetings with MassDOT's District 4 folks, probably both traffic and highway, as well as the MPO. And then there'll be a 45-day public comment period. And after, we're probably going to give folks about 10 days to 2 weeks after the public comment period begins, and then hold our final public meeting during the public comment period. Get all the comments back from them. We're going to have a joint meeting with the working group and the advisory committee one last time right at the end of the public comment period, and then issue the final report.
Thank you. Councilor Kennedy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So that's the end,
Yes.
of the
Yes,
presentation. Could you give us just a timeline of when it would be built? I mean, if we're showing prices or cost estimates for 2025, then what do you think it's going to take 12 years?
I'm hoping that it won't take 12 years. There are a couple of steps. One being there's no construction funding that's been secured yet. So the environmental permitting part of this can begin. Whether it's scoped for an environmental assessment or an environmental impact statement will depend on how long that process is. I know at a minimum there are Coast Guard permits that are needed that take 18 months, and there's no negotiating that time frame. So it would be a minimum of 18 months. It could be 2 to 3 years of environmental permitting until all the permits are in order. And then the design and the construction of the bridge, which Jody could talk a little more about general timeframes, but it doesn't take into account how long it may take to secure the funding for the bridge.
Okay, so could you just run through sort of a fast track estimate? If it takes environmental consideration, it's going to take 3 years at least?
So if we could start in 2014, you can assume, yes, all the environmental permits by 2017, and then do you want to just design and construction?
Sure. Typical design for a bridge of this magnitude is anywhere from a year to 2 years, going through all the design development process. Construction, bridge of this magnitude, again, I would estimate it's similar to University Ave Bridge. We're looking at probably a 3 or 4 year construction duration, especially if you look at University Ave by example, I think that's going on its second year of construction now, and that is half the span. It's roughly the same width as what was being proposed here, but that's half the span. And we're talking about bridges that at a minimum are 1,100 feet long. So that, in combination with having to construct it potentially in phases, if alternative 2 is ultimately selected, can expand the constructions, upwards of 3, 4, 5 years.
Okay, so would it be, 8 years, is that correct? Am I doing that correctly?
Yeah.
The quickest way would be 8 years from now?
Yes.
Okay, to have it built. I kind of agree with Councilor Martin that it seems like 6 lanes would be better than 4 lanes to me. And the reason that you're discarding 6 lanes is finances, is cost?
Not solely cost. That was one of the things we looked at. The ability to tie it on the south side was another thing that we looked at. And the third thing were the traffic projections through 2035, not 2025. And 2035 is consistent with the state's transportation planning year and Federal Highways transportation planning year. And the numbers that we've seen in terms of what we would expect the growth to be in the region and the additional projects that the city has going on and things of that nature, the volumes in 2035 are still supported by a 4-lane bridge with excess capacity to go beyond 2035.
Okay. The difference in cost, is it correct to just say it would be 1.5 times? Would a 4-lane, would it be another 50% for the extra 2 lanes that go like that, or are there?
At this level, that's how we're basing it with square foot cost, but that could escalate to something else off the bridge, depending on what the approach work would need to be. If we have to take down property or buildings associated with it, I know that we wouldn't necessarily have to do that.
You mean for 6 lanes?
Yeah, I mean, if you get with a wider structure, that escalates into potentially other highway elements off the bridge that you would have to construct or more costs associated with that.
Okay.
But for this level
Yeah.
of programming and everything, usually Mass DOT it's customary to do this on a cost per square foot basis. So I would agree that 4 to 6, there'd be that 1.5 times.
Okay. Is there a certain point at which the city should get aggressively involved with the Commonwealth, with pushing the Commonwealth to put this project higher on the agenda that maybe it would be if we didn't?
Yes.
And when would that be?
Now.
Right
Actually,
now?
yeah.
Okay.
Or, as soon as possible. I think that, we've got a great DOT District 4 representative on our advisory committee and our working group committee. But he has been clear that the DOT will be looking for the city to kind of set the agenda and the pace of the project.
Okay. And I went to most of the meetings that you had up at the hospital. And I guess, and I also was somewhat involved back when the first corridor study was done, which was some time ago. And I guess what's maybe disappointing isn't the correct word, but whether it's 4 lanes or 6 lanes, no matter what, in terms of it being a corridor, there isn't really a lot that you're recommending or suggesting on the south side, on the Wood Street side, is there? You kind of said, I think at some of the meetings, that you're just gonna have to do a bunch of little things and hope that you can provide some relief. But no matter how wide this bridge is, there's gonna be congestion on the south side. Is that correct?
Yes, it's correct to some level, and what we tried to do was minimize the property impacts on the south side. And I'm sure, as you're all familiar, the properties along the south side on Wood Street and on Westford Street are so close to the road there that there's really not a lot of room to make improvements. We have developed some concepts that show what the impacts would be if you were to improve Wood Street and make it 4 lanes instead of 2 lanes. It takes about 25 parking spaces from the Market Basket parking lot. The parking lot would have to be redesigned. We didn't progress that because of the size of the property impact and the fact that property impact, the cost related to it and everything, would fall on the city. I've since heard that Market Basket may be considering moving or redesigning the parking lot anyway. So we would definitely look for opportunities to work with them if that were to move forward so that we could widen Wood Street further south. And we've developed some concepts that show different ways that that can be done and what the impacts of those are. There's also a small parking impact to the condominium that is just south of Princeton Street, with widening Wood Street all the way down. Because if you start to widen Wood Street at Middlesex Street, you basically have to go all the way down past Princeton Street before you're really in an area where it's safe to narrow back down to one lane. Once you get south of there, on the west or the north side, there are significant environmental impacts. So that Westford Street portion, as well as the oldest house in Lowell. So the Westford Street portion, there's really no opportunity to widen to 4 lanes without some embankment work and some other significant environmental impacts.
Do you know if, let's say that Wood Street was able, let's say that we had the political fortitude and the cooperation of the property owners up there, and we were able to widen that to 4 lanes. Did you look into what the cost estimate for that would be, or how that would work? Did you just disregard that because it just seemed like that was going to be very expensive and very hard to do, or did you include that in your study?
We included it in the study. We haven't done cost estimates. Let me find. This graphic, I don't know how well it shows up on the screen, but the river is on the left, and you're headed towards Drum Hill Road on the right. And this kind of shows the extents of where the widening would be. The reason why we couldn't come up with cost estimates is because we don't have right-of-way. We don't have exact right-of-way information along the Wood Street corridor. So I'm using the available GIS mapping, which isn't really appropriate for cost estimates. We could come up with some rough order of magnitude costs just for widening by 1 lane in each direction, but it wouldn't include the property impact costs.
Okay, and it occurred to me that since really this is not so much of a corridor study, because there isn't truly a corridor, it's a bridge, it's widening the bridge. So the bridge will be at least in my view, is kind of standalone on both sides. So you're not doing really anything to improve the corridor. And I think that one of the big features from the study that was done years ago was that because it was a true corridor, 4 lanes all the way, what it was going to do is take a lot of the traffic that travels through downtown, that has no business downtown, but is just traveling through downtown and causing congestion, and give them an alternative, a nice alternative, so that they could circumvent the downtown area. Mm-hmm. Now, what impact will this bridge by itself, without doing the Wood Street or anything else, what will that do to alleviating any of the traffic congestion downtown?
In downtown Lowell or along the Wood Street corridor?
Downtown Lowell.
Most of the traffic, in any case, is already in that area. So it won't alleviate traffic from downtown Lowell. What it does do is it pulls traffic back off of the School Street Bridge, so that part of Lowell will see some reduction of traffic from folks that don't want to be there or need to be there. But they are on Wood Street today anyway, and they appear to be taking either Middlesex or Pawtucket over to School Street and then crossing the river and then coming back, or headed up to Dracut and Lowell. So it doesn't take traffic off of Wood Street, but it does alleviate some of the traffic on the School Street Bridge that doesn't want to be there.
Does it impact any of the bridges north of
Stingsboro?
or east of the School Street Bridge? Is that the last bridge that would be impacted by this new bridge?
By any kind of significant number of trips, yes. We were able to look at, I think there's about 12 or 13 bridges that cross, and we were able to look at all of them in the travel demand model and get a sense of traffic shifts from one to another, and everything shifts a little bit, but in terms of like a significant number of trips that you would actually notice in the peak hour or the peak period, it is limited to School Street and somewhat to University Ave too.
Okay. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Councilor Mercia, and then Councilor Lowry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I didn't think that you saw my hand up, but I wanted to ask, and you do a very good job. I might tell you, you did a wonderful job. I was at the last presentation at Lowell General Hospital as well, and I know that after that meeting, before it adjourned, you asked what people thought of the different alternative routes. So do you have any idea on which route is the most supportive?
It was pretty evenly split. I did hear some discussion on alternative 4, which is bringing the bridge a little bit further to the west, but still tying at grade at 113 as not really being viable because it does the same thing as 2 and as 6, and there's no extra benefit for it. So it sounded like folks, if that were an option, folks would prefer 5, which is grade separated, to 4. But in terms of where exactly it lies and whether it connects directly to Old Ferry Road or not, I think the public, those that were willing to say publicly what they supported, it was pretty well split among them.
Among what, 4 and 5?
2, 5, and 6.
2, 5, and 6?
Yes.
I happen to like 6. Joe likes 5.
That's pretty much what we were. Well, I think from a public standpoint, it would be great to have a publicly preferred alternative. It would be great to have an endorsement of 1 or 2 from the city council. I think because the transportation and the environmental and the structural impacts are so similar, probably all 4 of them need to have environmental permitting made through the NEPA-MEPA process, because that will actually flag the wetlands and look for the endangered species and things of that nature and not rely on the Mass GIS data layers to do that. So you may see them start to separate a little bit, but as it looks right now, it's largely going to be publicly driven and what can be supported by the community.
Thank you. Before Councilor Laurie, Councilor Elliott had his hand up.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wasn't at the last meeting, but I've been at other meetings, and I think the question was asked, I think by you, Councilor Kennedy, about time frame. And as someone who travels that bridge every day, several times, it's, I tell you, there's no funding in place. At best, we're looking at best, 8 years if funding were ever put in place in the best of conditions to have a bridge there. Costs are just going to increase. I tell you, that bridge is not going to last 8 years. And it's kind of like a flashback to what we just went through with the School Street Bridge, University Ave Bridge. It was on its last leg. The city had to put a couple of $1 million into it just to keep it open. It was closed for a period of time, and it was a nightmare. It was just a sheer nightmare to the point where it's on its last leg, and thank goodness the new bridge is being built. I can just foresee the same thing happening if we don't get involved almost yesterday. I mean, we really need to engage our delegation to put the funding cycle in place, because it could be 8 years plus. And it cannot happen. I mean, 27,000 cars, they're going to go somewhere else, and it's become a pretty significant commercial corridor. It's one of the worst traffic intersections in the city. So I'm not sure exactly what we need to do as a city, but we do need to take some strong actions to get funding in place and to move this project in a quicker fashion than it is moving. I mean, we've all gone to the meetings. We all understand the plight of the people that live on the other side of the city, trying to get over during periods of the day. And it's, again, it's a quality of life issue. It's miserable knowing that you have to go somewhere and you have to add 15, 20, 30 minutes of time. So, I think at the least a resolution of some sort, or I don't know. I think we have to have the manager. I think this should be the #1 priority of infrastructure improvements in the city. Otherwise, we're going to run right into the same situation that we just did, and that bridge is going to close. We're putting $1 million every time it needs. I think it's $1 million every year just to resurface or to address the structural issues. I believe that's report that we got from Mass Highway the last time. So, when is the funding cycle for construction, bridge construction? That goes through, is it District 4 that puts their priorities in, and that goes into state DOT, and they make the decision? Because I'm going to presume there's an appropriation every year.
This is a project that will have to be funded differently than other transportation projects in this region. We, as a region, get an allocation of federal funds every year from MassDOT, and typically our allocation is around $4 to $5 million. This is obviously a very large project that will have to be funded as sort of a mega project through the MassDOT process. MassDOT really establishes all of the priorities for the spending of bridge money. So,
is there a list of that, of the current priorities?
I can give you a list of things that are being programmed for funding over the next 4 years, and I can tell you that they use a funding mechanism for large projects like this called advanced construction, where they actually advertise projects for construction now, and they essentially borrow against future transportation dollars to pay for it.
How do we get involved in that process?
Probably the most effective way to get involved in that process is to work with your legislative delegation and to ask them to request that MassDOT give this project priority. There are a number of steps that have their own timeframes, as Laura outlined, such as environmental permitting, where you're really relying on the pace of certain federal agencies and others, and there's not a lot of control you can exert over that, but certainly in terms of how the state identifies its priorities, the legislative delegation can help sort of prompt that to happen more quickly. So I think it's been made very clear to us in working with MassDOT that the greatest likelihood of this project moving forward depends on the community being a strong advocate for the project.
Okay. Well, I think you heard loud and clear that we are a very strong advocate of this. So we need to engage the state delegation to make this a priority, because it's incomprehensible to me that we will have to wait this length of time. And I personally don't believe that bridge can sustain 8 years of traffic without a significant investment, being closed down, or being a safety hazard. I mean, it's 26, 27 years old, and so I appreciate the advice, the information, and I'll reach out to you to find out about that advanced bid process, because I think that's a good vehicle to pursue. Thank you. Thank you.
Council Lowry and then Council Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We talked a little bit about the width of the bridge, and I know we've discussed coming into Wood Street, it'd be very difficult and financially costly to widen it, and even if you do, coming in past Princeton Boulevard, you're back to step 1, you go into Chelmsford with all the lights, you're back into step 2. But looking at it as a corridor, and I really think this group has done a tremendous job. The money, it looks like we'll go into the infrastructure at the intersections and the lights to coordinate the lights from around the University Ave, the new bridge, down to the Rourke Bridge, through Chelmsford out to Drum Hill, and probably adding lights at various intersections, probably 3 or 4 in Lowell, to coordinate them with the School Street Bridge to move that traffic along also. Am I correct?
Correct.
Okay. So there are going to be improvements to the corridors?
Yeah, there are going to be.
But they're going to be through the intersections?
And they vary from simple things that can be implemented now, like traffic signal timing changes, to putting in new traffic signals, which also does not have funding secured yet. And the city has the list and is already making strides and making improvements where they can. So when you see the final list, you may notice some things that have already been done that are on it. Because for what the city has control over, they've already started to
So there are steps we are taking and can.
Yes.
The other, we're talking about a 4-lane bridge, but I think it's important for people to realize we're also talking about a pedestrian crossway, bicycle paths, and extra room on the bridge. for emergency vehicles to cross. So if an ambulance has to come across the bridge now at 5 o'clock, cars can pull over, the ambulance will get across. We have a fire station across in Pawtuckerville. If there's a fire in the Highlands, he can now come across. Structurally, the Rourke Bridge wouldn't hold him now, but structurally, not only will a new bridge hold the fire truck, but there'll be enough room for the cars to move and he'll come across. So, and I think that's important for people to understand also. Right now, those are two features that can't happen. So it is 4 lanes, bike path, pedestrian path, and room for emergency vehicles to move back and forth. And the improvements in the roadways will be through the intersections to move traffic at a quicker rate through the intersections. Okay, thank you.
Those improvements can happen sooner if funding can be identified for them, because a lot of them don't need environmental permitting.
You know, as we sit here tonight, it sounds like the traffic's going to come over and just sit. But I thought it was important for people to know the work that your organizations have done collectively to look at the area as a region, to put new lights in different areas, to coordinate them, and to really move the traffic quicker that way. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Councilor Kennedy and then Councilor Mendoza.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, this is, as we all saw, this is going to be an expensive project, and this is going to be something that's going to have to be treated as a special project if we ever truly hope to get funding for this. And I think that what Councilor Elliott suggested, that we move this to the front of the agenda in terms of infrastructure projects. If we're going to do that, then what we also should do, in my opinion, is develop a political strategy for this. And I think that should be, that part of that should be involving the communities around Lowell that also are impacted by the bridge. And Dracut comes to mind, and so does Chelmsford. And so, you know, we should reach out to those communities and get those communities to get on board and to be involved in having the bridge come to fruition as well. And I think beyond that, it would be prudent for the city council to develop a subcommittee and to meet on it and to communicate with those other communities and with the Northern Middlesex Council of Governments on a regular basis and with the delegation. And if we can add other communities besides Lowell, then that means we have a bigger delegation, which can only be helpful as well. And I think that those are just some of the ideas that come to my mind as things that we should be doing if we're hoping that this ever comes to fruition and doesn't just end up being another study on the shelf 10 years from now.
Thank you. I would point out that we do have a transportation subcommittee, which Councilor Lowry chairs, and the intent was, because he's also the representative to NEMCOG, that there would be some interaction between the two.
Right now,
Councilor Lowry?
the reason why it's been pretty quiet, they're doing the public studies right now, so everything is being done really in public, and we're bringing it forward that way.
Sure.
And, okay.
Councilor Mendoza.
I haven't said much so far because I have attended most of the sessions, and I appreciate all the work that NEMCOG and VHB has done as part of this study. And I mean, I've been pushing for this for some number of years now, and I agree with my fellow councilors that we can't lose momentum on this now. We need to keep forging ahead, because even at best, we're talking 8 years. It could be 15 years if we let it lapse. And we need to accelerate it, because I agree, the current bridge just cannot serve our needs at this time. And I do hope that we consider either option 5 or 6 moving forward, because option 2 leaves a lot of the same problems that we have now, except that it's a wider bridge. Whereas I think options 5 and 6 gives us more flexibility for future improvements once the bridge is in place. So I mean, I'm all for moving this forward and doing what we can to keep or increasing the momentum so that we can get this. And it would be great if it would be in 8 years, even better if it would be sooner. And of course, the projections they did were if we built it in 2025. So if we actually could get it sooner, there might actually be a reduction in their cost estimates. We can't know for sure until they actually go to bid for construction, but sooner could actually reduce the cost rather than later. So we certainly need to do what we can to move ahead, work with our state delegation to start getting this prioritized so that it can get some funding to at least get into design and then into construction. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Lowry?
Just to add in a little bit, right now, the quickest way that they're talking is 8 years, and that's because of the impact studies and, of course, the financing. And I think there is one way we're just talking, you could really quicken the pace here and without the impact studies, but you'd have to leave the bridge at 2 lanes, and I don't think anyone wants to leave that bridge at 2 lanes. And I think that's about the only way.
That you'd still have to go through state environmental permitting,
You'd have to
most
do part of the
likely.
studies
Yeah,
anyway.
yeah.
So, yeah. So the studies are going to take 3 or 4 years, and so.
I think with the length of the discussion we've had, yeah, we knocked it down to 7.5. But
Yeah.
maybe we could entertain a motion then to refer it to the Transportation Subcommittee. So moved by Councilor Kennedy, second by Councilor Lowry. All those in favor?
Oh,
Signify by
excuse me.
saying aye. Opposed? So voted. Councilor
I
Lowry?
was going to say, before we do that, can we send a letter, I think Councilor Elliott had mentioned, to the delegation to make this a primary push right now for the city,
Sure.
to send that along with the
Sure,
subcommittee.
the manager
Okay, thank you.
can work on that. Entertain then a motion to accept and place on file. So moved by Councilor Mendonça, seconded by Councilor Elliott. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you.
Next, we have a vote approving the 2013 through 2014 Annual Action Plan. Motion to waive the full reading by Councilor Mercia, seconded by Councilor Noon. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Vote in City Council, authorizing the approval and submission of the federal fiscal year 2013-2014 City of Lowell Annual Action Plan to the Department of Housing and Urban Development. What's the wish of the council? Move to approve by Councilor Martin, seconded by Councilor Elliott. Just prior to taking the vote, I think we all, or many of us, need to take disclosures. Councilor Mendonça?
One of the recipients Rebuilding Together, I'm on their board. That was my involvement in this, I'm just on the board.
Thank you. Councilor Mercia?
Same here, except that I'm on CTI's board.
Councilor Martin?
I'm on the Lowell Parks and Conservation Trust Board.
Councilor Lowry on CTI?
Excuse me?
Councilor Lowry's on the CTI board. I'm on the CTI board as well as Mill City Grows.
I was handing
and,
out the pamphlets that we were
and it's
left with.
okay, and closely associated with the West End Gym.
Right. And the reason for these disclosures is because of a perceived or possible perception of conflict of interest.
Possible perception.
And I
of
think
conflict, yeah.
because not all of us are volunteers in this board and no one receives any financial payment for serving, you're entitled to vote as long as you make the disclosure.
That's correct. Any further disclosures? Councilor
Yes,
Mercia?
one more disclosure. Indirectly, I'm on the Friends of the Council on Aging Board. It has nothing to do with the Council on Aging financially from that, but I just want to say that because it's connected somehow.
Okay, and no one receives money for it, so that's, okay. Roll call, please.
Councilor Mendonça.
Yes.
Councilor Mercia.
Yes.
Mayor Murphy.
Yes.
Councilor Nguyen.
Yes.
Councilor Elliott.
Yes.
Councilor Kennedy.
Yes.
Councilor Leahy.
Yes.
Councilor Lowry.
Yes.
Councilor Martin.
Present.
8 yeas.
Thank you. Next, we have a vote, an ordinance amend zoning for Chapter 290. Motion to waive the full reading by Councilor Leahy, seconded by Councilor Lowry. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Reading by title, ordinance in City Council. An ordinance amending the code of the City of Lowell, Massachusetts with respect to Chapter 290 thereof entitled zoning by amending various sections. Entertain a motion to refer to the Planning Board for report and recommendation and to a public hearing on June 11, 2013 at 7 p.m.
So moved.
So moved by Councilor Kennedy, seconded by Councilor Mendonça. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Next, we have a vote to approve the economic opportunity area for 110 Canal Street. Motion to waive the full reading by Counsel Noon, seconded by Counsel Laurie. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Reading by title. In City Council vote approving the 100 Canal Street Economic Opportunity Area. Mr. Manager, do you have any explanation?
Mr. Bakey?
Sure, this will seem a little bit familiar to the councilors that have voted in the past on other projects that have gone through the state's EDIP program, which is their State and Local Partnership Economic Development Incentive Program. What is different about this particular proposal, I think we've had one like this in the past, is that the state tax incentives that the developer is looking to take advantage of are the abandoned building tax deduction. And that program requires us to place the property in an economic opportunity area and also approve a TIF plan. But the TIF plan does not actually involve us, in this case, providing any local property tax benefits. And we do not need to in order for the property owner to access this particular state benefit. This is different than the typical TIF that we deal with, where we provide a local property tax benefit and the developer or business then obtains a different state tax credit that does require that local contribution. So in this case, what we are doing is we are basically designating it in such a manner that it enables the property owner and developer of 110 Canal Street to access the abandoned building tax deduction. And what that in turn does is it enables them to transfer some of those benefits to potential tenants in the form of charging less rent. So it's to the advantage of the city as well as to the advantage of the developer in terms of moving a little more quickly and getting tenants into that building.
Thank you. What's the wish of the council? Councilman Johnson, move to approve.
Move approval.
Yes.
Seconded by Councilor Elliott. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilman Mendoza.
Yes.
Council Mercia.
Yes.
Mayor Murphy.
Yes.
Council Nguyen.
Yes.
Council Elliott.
Yes.
Council Kennedy.
Yes.
Council Leahy.
Yes.
Council Laurie.
Yes.
Council Martin.
Yes.
9 yeas.
Next, we have a vote to approve the TIF plan with Trinity Financial LLC. Motion to waive the full reading by Council Laurie, seconded by Council Martin. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Reading by title. In City Council vote, authorizing a tax increment financing plan for Trinity Financial LLC. What's the wish of the council?
Move approval.
Approval by Council Kennedy, seconded by Council Mercia. Council Mendoza.
Well, actually, I had a question about this, but it was actually answered in the previous one, because I didn't see any details of the tax increment financing, but apparently, so there's none that apply to the city. There'll be none in the future either, or?
I don't believe so, but if there's some business that chooses to locate there may be some build-out costs associated with that, but
So
we
it
don't
might just
anticipate
apply to
anything right
another
now.
individual business, not this particular development. All right, thank you.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Council Mendoza.
Yes.
Council Mercia.
Yes.
Mayor Murphy.
Yes.
Council Nguyen.
Yes.
Council Elliott.
Yes.
Council Kennedy.
Yes.
Council Leahy.
Yes.
Council Laurie.
Yes.
Council Martin.
Yes.
It's 9 yeas.
Thank you. Next, we have a loan order for $13,610,000 for capital improvements. A motion to waive the full reading by Council Noon, seconded by Council Mercia. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Reading by title. Loan order, capital improvement bonds. In City Council to borrow $13,610,000 for the purpose of financing various capital improvements and any related architectural and engineering services in connection therewith and any costs incidental and related thereto. I'd entertain a motion to refer to a public hearing on May 28th, 2013 at 7 p.m.
So moved.
So moved by Council Kennedy, second by Council Laurie. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Next, we have subcommittee reports. Public Safety Subcommittee of May 14th, 2013. Council Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Public Safety Subcommittee met earlier this evening. The other members of the subcommittee, Councilor Elliott, Vice Chairman Mendoza. This was another meeting in a series of meetings we've been conducting at the suggestion of the citywide neighborhood group on various topics. This one happened to be about fire department safety standards and various responsibilities that landlords and tenants have. There was some discussion of that by the fire chief, Pitta, and also Mark McGuan, who's about to become the captain in charge of fire prevention. Also at the subcommittee meeting, I think, were Councilors Laurie and Leahy and Councilors Mercier and Noon. So we had a general discussion about that. There wasn't a whole lot of new ground covered. There was some discussion about, the requirements that people keep smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors in working order in their homes. That responsibility generally falls to the landlord, especially at time of property transfer, although, tenants are well advised to keep the batteries replaced and landlords informed of malfunctions. There was some comments from the neighborhood groups that this team approach seemed to be working well. We do turn up violations of fire safety codes in connection with the inspections that are being undertaken as part of the new housing ordinance. There was a question about open fire pits, which despite their popularity in some places are not legal in the city of Lowell. We're one of 22 communities that don't allow those. And another thing was gas grills, which are not allowed above the first floor level, and in all cases need to be outside. We had invited Superintendent Friedel from the police department to come and appear before the subcommittee just by way of introduction. It's the first opportunity since she's been named as the interim superintendent to appear, and so she also appeared at the subcommittee, talked about various internal issues that she's dealing with in the police department, as well as some recent crime activity that's been matter of public discussion. She re-emphasized her commitment for community policing and smart policing, monitoring these crimes and keeping police officers properly deployed. She talked briefly what she could about recent incidents, one of which a suspect has been identified, another one they're still trying to plow their way through the real truth as to what happened. Oftentimes in some of these incidents, you don't get cooperation from even the victim, which tells you a whole lot about the nature of the incident. None of the recent incidents appeared to be random attacks, and there was some discussion of that, how that doesn't necessarily make people feel any safer, but people should be, but these incidents at least did not, were not accidental, some, innocent passersby being victimized. And Superintendent Friedel also talked about the hiring process ongoing right now. There is an academy starting in June, and potentially there will be as many as 15 candidates from Lowell. Those will not be 15 additions to the force. A good number of those are to fill slots open by retirement, but certainly the police department, I think the council is committed to keeping a full complement of police officers, or as full as we can, given budget constraints. And so that'll be the largest number of candidates in the academy that we've had since the 1990s, when the COPS program first came into existence. The third item we discussed at the subcommittee meeting was a motion by Councilor Leahy concerning crosswalks on Varnum Avenue. Again, there was some neighborhood input about that and discussion among the council. There is an existing crosswalk at West Meadow Road where the schools are, but there's been some requests for additional crosswalks, which may not be, at least in the opinion of the traffic engineer, the safest approach. And so that matter was referred, and maybe the right answer is just to have a sidewalk on both sides of the street, eliminate the need for crosswalks down Varnum Avenue. So that matter was referred back to the manager for a report back on cost and other issues that might be involved with constructing sidewalks on the northerly side of Varnum Avenue. So that's a brief discussion of the topics at the meeting. Open it up to anyone else who had anything else to add.
Thank you. Councilor Noon?
I also have report, if no one else have anything to add to the report from the chairperson of Public Safety, the report from the Immigration Subcommittee, Immigration Commission.
Okay, let's first stay with the subcommittee.
Thank you.
Are there any people that wish to discuss? Council Leahy?
Thank you. Through you to the manager, I just want to thank you for listening. The neighbors were interested in that for the crosswalks, and I understand the report and what we talked about tonight. Any idea maybe when the signage could go up at least while we take a look at the other?
Oh, I think the signage could be something that could be done very, very quickly, and that's, I would say, without knowing exactly if the signs are in stock and so on, I think we could do that within the next week or two. And then the sidewalk consideration will be a bit lengthier because that's going to require some engineering analysis to determine rights of way and to get some cost estimates and all, but the signage is something that we can move quickly on.
Is the signage, is it a uniform state or federal? Some communities have the green sign, some have yellow, some have, so how does that work?
You can make your own decisions on that. Most of the signs that we use are yellow, I believe.
We don't get any
with
federal
advisories.
money out of
No.
Safe Routes to School or anything like that?
No, I don't believe we get any on that, but we'll certainly follow up and check on that.
Okay, thank you.
Council Laurie?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We were just talking about the bridge, and once that bridge goes in, Varnum Ave's going to pick up X amount of traffic per day, so won't West Meadow Road. Is there any way we could apply for funding for those sidewalks because of the additional traffic that may come due to that bridge?
Certainly, that's a possibility, but it's. I think the bigger issue right now is getting the bridge.
Oh, absolutely.
That would be just a very small part. If you're talking $60 million to do add a sidewalk as part of an environmental impact or impact.
That's what I'm thinking about, throwing it in. It's going to be quite expensive.
But that's so many years down the road, and I think
Okay, just a thought.
Any further discussion on the report? Entertain a motion to accept and place on file. So moved by Councilman Johnson, second by Council Noon. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Council Noon on the Immigration Assistance Commission.
The Immigration Commission met yesterday. They now have full commission, and thanks to the managers. They discuss way to involve other organizations and who serve the city, as well as to get some information from the city department and to be educating them so that they can educate the rest of the community. They are asking the managers to link their page to the city website. Their next meeting is going to be in June 10, 6 p.m. at the mayor reception room. I believe it's going to be in the next week or two. It's going to be the African festival, and each and every council will receive invitation from the chair of the Immigration Commission, who happen to also be organize these African festivals as well. Thank you. Yeah, it's June 15.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further discussion on this, Councilor Elliott?
No, not on this. I
Okay,
have
entertain a motion then to accept and place on file. So moved by Councilor Mercia, second by Councilor Noon. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Councilor Elliott.
The Commission on Disability met last Thursday, and it was the monthly meeting, Mr. Mayor. A couple of motions came forward. Mr. Manager, there's still no update, or maybe you can provide an update on the status of the closed captioning that they've been waiting for quite some time. So I don't know if you have that, or if you want to provide it to us, but it's been a few years now. So, and
it has been about a year, I think, that I believe the mayor and I attended a meeting with the commission a year or so ago that we talked about the Watertown experience, and they wanted to head down that road, and I believe they met with someone from Watertown. More recently, I had some discussions with some members from the commission that have indicated that they believe Arlington and Cambridge because the Watertown example had some issues, but they suggested we look at Arlington and Cambridge, and we did do that, and it turns out that those communities do not provide closed captioning. So Watertown continues to be the one example, and I did meet with the LTC. They would be the ones that would be handling this for us, and they're moving forward to develop the equipment necessary. And again, I think there'll be a report that we'll be providing back to the Commission on Disabilities with our findings and recommendations on that in short order.
Can you tell me, Mr. Manager, when we can expect that report?
I would hope I would hope we could get something to them for the June timeframe.
For June? Because I understand their point, because I have been coming here month after month, and I feel like I'm a little bit of a broken record trying to find out. The money has been put in place. Watertown representative came in when I went on the first meeting that I was appointed. That's well over a year ago. So, I mean, I know these things take time, but the commission feels like they're being shortchanged, Mr. Manager. I have to say, quite frankly, I think each week we're working on it. First, I think it was last month, it was trying to develop an agreement with the law department, and it just is moving at a snail's pace. And members on the commission, there's 2 members on the commission that have been pushing for this, and money is in place. So it would be nice. I mean, the June time frame, it just seems, it keeps slipping, Mr. Manager. I'm just being straight up and honest, and it shouldn't be that way. This should have been done quite some time ago. And I think what was most revealing was this week when there was a representative from Rockland. As a matter of fact, he's the chairperson of the State Commission on Disabilities. And he brought forward some figures of the number of individuals in the community that are hearing impaired. And they estimate up to 10% of the populations throughout the Commonwealth. That converts to, about over 10,000 people. This was from 2007 estimates, are hearing impaired, and they would benefit from this closed captioning. So they wanted me to bring that forward. I wanted to bring that information forward because I think it does put it into perspective. Even in the city, upwards of 22, the estimate is 22% of the people have some form of disability. So again, it puts it into perspective the magnitude of the number of disabled people we have in the community. So I understand we're working through it, but the sooner the better would be appreciated.
Mr. Manager.
Yeah, and Counselor, I certainly understand I think that I certainly understand the money being there. That was something that was an initiative of the administration at the request of the Councilor Dakota, that they felt that there was some if they had some resources, they could address some of the needs of the disabled population of the city. And so we came up with a strategy of how to do that, and we put the money in place for them. And then it became a priority to do something about the closed captioning. And again, when we met back a little over a year ago, we talked to them about, they were talking about the Watertown example, and they were going to do the follow-up. The commission was going to do the follow-up, and there was some back and forth. And certainly, we want to do whatever we can to assist, but I think there was a little bit of a breakdown there that we needed to work through, and then we ran into the issues with LTC. The initial issue that we had with the closed captioning, there was a couple of different models that didn't seem particularly to work well. For example, one of them I know was that each and every time a counselor or myself or a speaker actually spoke, we'd have to identify ourselves. And it's because the closed captioning service would be provided off-site by someone who then would have to know who was talking so that they could put that in. And that seems somewhat cumbersome for the system to actually work. There were some other issues that I don't have at my fingertips right now. But again, the examples that were given to me most recently, within the last few weeks, was that we should look at Cambridge and Arlington, and we did, and they don't have it. So we're dealing with something that's brand new that we have to put in place with limited resources. And but I agree with you, and we'll get on that, and hopefully have something to the commission in June with what we found, and then have them make their decision.
Thank you. Good. Councilor Ellie.
Great. So the other question was, they would like, Commissioner would like a report on the expenditures from the funds that have been allocated to the Commission on Disability for the last 3 fiscal years. So that was the second motion that passed. And in conjunction with that, they also like to know how many tickets have been issued, because the money that comes in, it is a state law, according to a member of the commission. It's a state law that money comes in for parking citations for handicap, people that park in handicap spots. By state law, that has to go to your COD, your Commission on Disability, or, excuse me, a percentage of it, not the entire amount. I'll get the citation, in fact, the individual's name. But regardless, I'd just like to know how much money has been allocated, which was supposed to be $20,000 a year, and where that money has been spent. Some of it may have been for interpreters, it's my understanding, but it'd be good to know that information. And again, as well as the number of tickets that have been issued, or violations that have been issued. So that was a request from the members of the commission, and thank you.
Entertain a motion to accept as a report of progress. So moved by Councilor Laurie, seconded by Councilor Mercia. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Anyone else under subcommittee reports? Moving on then to utility petitions. We have one from National Grid, replace underground electric duct bank in sidewalk on Frida Lane. Entertain a motion to refer to a public hearing on May 28th, 2013 at 7 p.m.
So moved.
So moved by Councilor Kennedy, seconded by Councilor Laurie. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Motions. The first motion of the night, we have Councilor Mercia, request the city manager provide a report on what steps are being taken to reinforce safety in the neighborhood. Seconded by Councilor Noon. Councilor Mercia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a timely motion, and with the good weather upon us, people have more time on their hands with longer daylight hours, with boredom, etc. All leads to some sort of trouble at some times. And the incidents we've all read in the paper, in the newspaper, a man beaten on the sidewalk in broad daylight with no concern for people watching, not to even mention the person being beaten, to a man shot in the North Common at 7:30, and in full view of residents. And as we heard from Superintendent Friedel, they were having a Greek Orthodox ceremony and service, and many people were in the park. That was on May 2nd, and then on May 9th, there was a shooting in Centerville. So these things seem to be coming back again. So I say, through this motion, let's not lose all the progress and the good work that we have already done. Let's not rest on our laurels, and the neighborhood will be taken over by domineering thugs once again. So this motion is asking that we stay on top of the safety for the public. Let's not wait for trouble to strike and sweep through our neighborhoods. So let's be prepared to ward off crime. So this motion is asking if you could ask the proper department, which is the police department, what plan is in place to deter crime before it happens, what steps are being taken. This is, in essence, what I'm asking for, because we don't want to wait till it's too late. Thank you.
Any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Next motion by Councilor Mercia. Request the city manager have proper department repair the cement sidewalk in front of the Washington Savings Bank on Middlesex Street. Seconded by Councilor Mendonça. Councilor Mercia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the city manager. Mr. Manager, there was some discussion some time ago, maybe about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I segued this into that conversation, and evidently, I don't know when this will take place, but I went by there just the other day when they had another fundraiser for that One Fund Boston, and I had a better shot at looking at the cement sidewalks, and it's really bad. I'm not asking for a full-fledged sidewalk. I know it's costly, but if we have someone that mixes cement in the city, land and buildings or whatever, but the thing is, it's really eaten away somehow. And I want to tell you that like I told you before, a gentleman fell and tripped in one of those holes, and he hurt himself pretty bad in the face. He actually went to the hospital. He could have created a lawsuit against the city, but he didn't. But he asked me if I would take care of it. This was in the winter. There's not much I could do then, but it needs to be repaired. It's truly bad. That's in front of a bank. I don't expect the bank to pay, but do you expect the bank to pay? I wish they would, but I mean, it's our sidewalk, isn't it?
Mr. Manager.
I believe, Council, it's scheduled for this week. In fact, it may be one of those situations where
Where it was done today.
it may have been done today. It was scheduled to be done this week, so, and then
Thank
to
you,
do a
that's
temporary
important.
repair and then a more permanent repair in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? Councilor Laurie.
Just a quick question on sidewalks. I was knocking on doors the other day up on White Street, and they're getting new sidewalks and they're cement. And when did we go to cement sidewalks? I know we used to do some hot top, because what they do is they do the cement sidewalk, and then they have to hot top areas to go into someone's driveway. Is it more cost-effective for cement, or?
I believe it is more cost-effective. They hold up better.
They do hold up. So I noticed they had to do some hot topping into.
And most people like the
Well, I
cement
thought it looked
sidewalks.
great, but one of the individuals asked me, and I wasn't sure why. I know it had preceded me. Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion on this motion? All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Next motion by Councilor Noon. Request the city manager provide report regarding the effectiveness of procedures during the past preliminary election with any recommendations for improvement. Seconded by Councilor Mercia. Councilor Noon.
Thank you, Mayor. I know that the city solicitor working with the elections department in the last few months have some training and put together some protocol in terms of preparing for this past primary special U.S. Senate elections. And so I'd like to get a report on that to see, how effective that implementation of the new procedures, and or whether or not there's any problem or issues that occur this recent election, and how we can prepare for it in the upcoming election in June, that is a special U.S. general election.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councilor Leahy.
I just had one quick comment. When I went to vote, I thought we were gonna put signage up so you knew which table to go to, and we still had the ward and precinct taped to the table. So wasn't that part of the discussion that we were gonna maybe elevate it somehow? Did we just not get to it at that election, or?
No,
Madam
actually,
Solicitor.
I'm sorry to interrupt. No, actually, we did increase the signage, but I'll check on the, we also took photos of each of the voting setups, and we'll take a look at those again, and we're gonna be passing those out in the packets, so that first of all, people know how to set up the tables. There was an incident at the senior center where the tables really weren't set up as you would hope that they would be. So anyway, we'll take a look at that, and we'll also take a look at the signage issue again, and sort of take it up another notch and improve upon.
But you know what I mean? I thought it was gonna be like on a stick, so when you came in, it was 6 or 7 feet high versus on the table, so when you get a crowd, you can't see which table they're going to.
No, that's a good point. We'll
Okay.
we'll try to elevate it.
All right, thank you.
Councilman Mendonça.
While we're on the topic, through you, maybe to the solicitor, do we have procedures in place to detect or record any voter irregularity or any detect fraud? Do we keep track of that? Just to have it, I mean, if people want to say that there are irregularities, it'd be nice to have some data behind it.
Right.
What are the procedures we do have in place?
Well, the procedures that we have in place really are more along the lines of conducting an election by closely following the law, and in proper training of the poll workers. And in instances where there's something that may come up, we don't exactly know. We can't predict how somebody's going to potentially be involved in an incident of fraud, but if there's evidence of it, part of the protocol in the past, and we're continuing with it, is to immediately notify the Secretary of State's office, the Elections Office. And so I've been in contact with them in the past, and we'll continue to do that. And we also have sort of more observers out, all the members of the law department, the attorneys, accompanied different license commissioners, election commissioners rather, around to the polls during the day of election. And then we are still sticking with an independent outside person who will come in and make observations, and she makes observations in the office and then out on the field, and we'll continue that for at least some time.
Is there any log kept of any perceived irregularities?
I mean, irregularities hopefully are going to be something that we don't encounter, and because they're the rarity, there really wouldn't be a log of them. Actually, in saying that, it's a good idea to probably document any instances that we might have come across in the past and keep a record of those for moving forward. We can certainly do something like that.
Yeah, that was kind of the tack I was taking, was
Sure.
if we had the data, then we could at least say, yes, there is, or no, there isn't irregularities taking place. And so
Yeah.
without the data, we just don't know.
Right, it's probably less an instance of actual data, because it's hopefully so rare, but more of a maybe perhaps narrative that we keep on file of things that might come up from time to time. And so that's an excellent idea to add to our always increasing to-do list.
Appreciate it, thank you.
Any further discussion on this motion? Councilor Elliott.
So, as I was listening to Madam Solicitor, there are no procedures in place to prevent irregularities from taking place. I mean, it's like spot checks, people making some observations, and I had a similar motion or a motion about elections last week that I pulled because it got late. But, you know, in my opinion, I think the system is ripe for abuse or fraud, because there's no way for anyone to identify who that voter is. And, states across the country are adopting ID systems because, now, I'm not saying it's a major problem, but you need an identification card to get anything in life. And whether it's a bank account, whether it's a driver's license, anything, or everything rather. And one of the most basic rights, the most important rights I think that we have, you don't need an ID. You don't need to identify yourself. And I think the system needs to improve. The rest of the country clearly indicates there's a number of bills in the legislature in Massachusetts pending. And this is about protecting, I think, my right and the rights of people that do go out, they take the time to vote, and not letting someone else go in under some other identity and just vote. So I think we have tightened up the system over the last number of years. We have received a number of reports from your office because the system did need to be tightened up, and I know this is a state issue, and even to some degree it's a federal issue, but I personally think that, this isn't a Republican or a Democrat issue, in my opinion. It's simply a way to make sure that we protect the rights of those people that go out and cast their vote. And there are people out there, they'll go out and they'll try to abuse the system. They'll try to beat the system. It's taken place, across the country, and it's wrong. So, I mean, the motion asks for what have we done since then. I think we've done a number of things, and there's still more room for improvement. And the best way to prevent any irregularities or fraud or abuse is certainly to put an identification process in place. So, figured I'd take the opportunity to speak on this, and that's
Okay,
that's how I feel.
that's fine, but it does vary substantially from what the motion is. I understand it's related to election procedures, but there may be members of the public that would want to weigh in either pro or con. And for that purpose, I think that if we do want to go on that road in discussing that issue of your discussion, then it's wiser probably to put a motion on for next week, probably the motion you had on for last week, before we continue down that road.
I don't disagree, Mr. Mayor, but we were starting to look for data on irregularities, and
I
how can you
understand it's
find the
related
right...
to the election, and that's
Right.
fine, and that's why I allowed you to continue on that course of discussion, but I think if we're going to continue that, it should be at a later date. Council Laurie?
To that point, I've worked in some federal and state elections. As part of that motion, can we get a ruling from the law department? There is a state law on what you can require or what you can do. I'm just asking, can we have a ruling from the law department so we're within the state laws? And I think it would be good going along with the motion, knowing what the state laws are.
Again, that's fine if it's
No,
brought up next week.
I'm just asking as part of that report what the state law is.
It's more affiliated with what
No,
was
it's
Councilor
part of-
Elliott was discussing
Yeah.
than Councilor Noon. Madam Solicitor?
I was just going to, in response to Councilor Elliott, as far as not having procedures to prevent fraud, my response really is that in following the law, that is what is laid out to prevent instances of fraud. So, for example, last time around when we did have an issue with respect to the nursing home procedure, we stopped it. The ballots were destroyed. There was ballots were then gathered again from the nursing homes, but really there are a number of instances where we weren't following the procedures that are laid out there for us, and in doing so, then those are designed to prevent issues of fraud. We haven't, the types of issues that you're talking about, we haven't had instances of. It's not to say that some might not be out there, but not to our knowledge.
Any further discussion on this motion? All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. Next motion by Councilor Noon. Request the city manager provide a report regarding the Sun Building construction, including estimated length of time that staging will be in place. Seconded by Councilor Mercia. Councilor Noon.
Mr. Mayor, that Sun Building construction is an eyesore to downtown. It's also a safety hazard. I don't know the reasons. I'm sure the manager through the assistant city manager, Adam Backey, will find out exactly why they stopped constructions and when are they going to resume it. I would suggest that while they are waiting to address whatever problem that they have, that they take down that stage. And until they can put it back up when they resolve their problem, when they resume construction, because it is a safety issues for downtown, and it's also affecting the businesses down there as well, particularly the businesses located down from that Sun Building. I know that other council, I believe Councilor Leahy had a motion a while back on this issue, same issue. We shouldn't have to, bring it up, every other month or maybe every other week. So I hope that we can resolve this and get the owners to take down the stage. So that's the gist of the motion. Thank you.
Councilor, I believe there was a motion before that Councilor Leahy had made, as well as I think Councilor Martin in the past, and the administration did respond to that. And I think it will be a substantial amount of time before, probably at least 2 years before we see the staging removed. Any further discussion on this motion? Council Kennedy?
Well, let me just add that I think that in that, as part of that discussion a couple of weeks ago, one of the things that was pointed out was that the staging or the scaffolding is actually serves a safety purpose. So it's safer to have it be there than, maybe it doesn't look good, but it's there for safety reasons.
That's right. Councilor Elliott?
Look, I agree. I mean, we've had, I think it was just 2 weeks ago that we had Adam Bakey up here giving a very lengthy deliberation. I don't know how many times Councilor Martin has brought this up. At least a half a dozen. And so I'm not going to support this motion because we know what the answer is. It was 2 weeks ago. It was a very, very long discussion, it wasn't discussion, or explanation as to the challenges and the problems with that building. And we certainly cannot take the scaffolding down. So we're going to get the same report saying the same thing. The DPD is working, and I think to the best of their ability to move that project forward. But they're meeting certain requirements, and that's all that we can do under the law is to push them to meet the requirements, and that's what they're doing. It's unfortunate, but there's not much else we can do.
Any further discussion on this motion? All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed?
No.
1 nay, so voted. Next motion by Councilor Noon, request the city manager report on progress of search for the new police superintendent. Excuse me. Next motion by Councilor Noon, request city manager establish a review panel for oversight of the auditorium management contract to meet annually. Seconded by Councilor Mercia. Councilor Noon.
I'm not seconding that motion. I don't support it.
Any second? See,
Discussion. I'll second the motion for discussion.
seconded by Councilor Kennedy. Councilor Noon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know that we recently passed the contract with the management global, and I know that's a lot of concern over the oversight. I just put this up so that we are being proactive about this, and that the city and the Board of Trustee for the auditorium will annually, not waiting for problem occurs, annually reviewing that contract to see whether or not any breach of the contract by the global company, Spectrum company. So, and that's the reason why I brought the motions, to see whether or not they meet all those agreements that set forth with the city. City and Board of Trustee working together to make sure that the investment of the city secure, taken care of, and that's the reason.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Kennedy.
Mr. Mayor, I seconded the motion for discussion purposes, but it seems to me that what the motion is asking for, it falls within the scope of the Auditorium Board of Trustees, or if it doesn't, it should. And so I would suggest that maybe the maker of the motion might want to amend the motion or offer a substitute motion that would just refer the matter to the Board of Trustees to make sure that they're diligent in their effort to do that. But the motion as it stands now, although I seconded the motion, it seems redundant to me to establish a review panel to look at the auditorium finances once a year when the Auditorium Board of Trustees should be doing that.
To the maker of the motion, do you wish to amend to refer to the...
Councilor Kennedy, I'd be happy to do that as long as we have an oversight of that auditorium agreement.
Motion to amend the original motion, seconded by Councilor Laurie.
I was going to amend it to send it to the Finance Committee.
I think that's even more redundant. Seconded by Councilor Laurie.
That's your opinion. That's your opinion, so.
I'll second.
On the motion, Councilor Elliott.
Both of these motions are completely out of order. The delegated authority is to the Board of Trustees. We spent hours on this last week. It's very clear, not only in the state law, but it's very clear in the contract that the maker of the motion voted for. The Board of Trustees, and it's specified on multiple occasions that the Board of Trustees provides the direct oversight to the management company. So I don't support the amendment. I don't support the original motion because it makes no sense. I do not understand what we're trying to do. There is a board, there's a manager, and the next governing body is this city council. So if you didn't like the contract, the way that it was set up, then you shouldn't have voted for it. But to put another board on top of a current trustees with the manager and the city council it just doesn't make any sense to me at all whatsoever, and I'm not going to support it. And also, I just want to say to you, Mr. Manager, I understand, I read the newspaper Sunday and I read your comments about Mr. Topia, and
I'm not sure what this has to do with
well,
the
we're talking
oversight of the audit.
we're talking about oversight. So
Well, let's not get into
I just
anything
think
personal here.
I'm not. He made some comments about someone that
Well, this is
we
unrelated to the motion.
that we appoint, and I think it was a complete mischaracterization.
This is unrelated to the motion, Counselor.
Okay.
Counselor Kennedy, on the motion,
On the substitute motion,
on the substitute motion.
I think that Counselor Elliott's comments are correct. However, the maker of the motion is well-intentioned, and it should be the Auditorium Board of Trustees that provides that financial oversight. So it does no harm to pass the motion and move on to the next motion.
Any further discussion on the substitute motion? All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed?
Roll call.
Roll call.
This on the amendment, Mr. Mayor?
It's on the substitute motion.
Counselor Mendonça.
No.
Counselor Mercia.
No.
Mayor Murphy.
Yes.
Counselor Nguyen.
Yes.
Counselor Elliott.
No.
Counselor Kennedy.
Yes.
Counselor Leahy.
Yes.
Counselor Laurie.
Yes.
Counselor Martin.
No.
5
Like-
yeas.
Next motion by Counsel by Counsel Noon. Request the city manager report on progress for the search for a new police superintendent. Second by Counsel Laurie, Counsel Noon.
Mr. Mayor, the motion speaks for itself, so thank you.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed? So voted. Next motion by Counsel Laurie. Request the city manager have proper department develop a 5-year economic vision plan for the Lowell Memorial Auditorium and surrounding areas. Second by Counsel Leahy, Counsel Laurie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The idea, we just gave a 5-year contract, and what we could possibly do with the auditorium in the area, the downtown area, and just to report on what we can, hopefully look forward to, or some idea. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this motion? Counsel Martin.
Just a few years back, I think DPD had looked at creating an urban renewal district in that neighborhood, and I think that effort fell short in part because it wasn't sufficiently blighted to qualify as a urban renewal area. But I think there are probably things in that plan that might be useful in responding to this motion, so, okay.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed? So voted. The next 3 motions are by myself. If Councilman Mendonça will take the chair.
Next motion by Mayor Murphy. City Council requests city manager report on efforts to house the homeless displaced by last week's removal of river camps and any follow-up plans to address the issue. Seconded by Councilor Mercier. Mayor Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The motion is really to get an idea of how successful the city was in moving the homeless into places where they would be safe. And I was glad to hear Council Lowry's comments earlier about the initial intent behind the original motion, and I think it became clearer that night than it had been before about what the intent was when Mr. Paul Boulay had spoken on it, and really making sure, I think, at least for me, it was important that we made sure that the focus was on the people there and how we get them to proper housing, and not necessarily first on the removal of those tents throughout the area there. So the first part of it really is to make sure that has happened, and I certainly appreciate some of the efforts, because I think many are in a safer place now than they had been, and I appreciate the efforts of the city to begin or initiate this new program through the use of the home funds to rapidly house some of the homeless there and in other camps. I think for me, the main concern was in the time frame of a 7-day deadline, because although it may not have been intended that way, the suggestion there is that the focus wasn't necessarily on getting the people housing first and then addressing the removal of the tents. And so I hope that not only do we get a report out of this of how successful the city, working with a number of the social service agencies, was, but also making sure that when this happens in the future, in other areas along on the river and elsewhere, that it's done in maybe a more, a way that's more compassionate and really addresses the individual needs of those people in a proper time frame. I understand the intent was certainly to do that, but I think you need a longer time frame, given the wide range of needs that people there have. Thank you.
All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion's carried. Next motion by Mayor Murphy. Request city manager provide update on Halesbrook Greenway planning study. Seconded by Councilor Martin. Mayor Murphy.
Thank you. This was an issue I brought up 2 years ago that begins in our neighborhood, back central neighborhood, and runs through to other places out towards Chelmsford, and being able to connect up the Concord River Greenway to the Bruce Freeman Trail in what has historically been a highly polluted area. And so hopefully we can get a report of the study that took place and was funded, I think, through NIMCOG. Thank you.
All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion's carried. Last motion of the evening by Mayor Murphy. Request city manager and solid waste recycling committee report back revised recycling ordinance changes and draft a proper vote. Seconded by Councilor Noon. Mayor Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is something that we had a subcommittee on back in several months ago, I think, and had suggested a number of revisions to go back to the Solid Waste and Recycling Advisory Subcommittee, or committee rather, and hopefully we can get those revisions back to us so that we can actually begin to implement some of the ordinance changes. Thank you.
Councilor Leahy.
Thank you. Does this motion also does this relate to, do we have an upcoming, the contract, is that gonna be renewed, and, were we gonna go to a one system type of recycling where we don't have to separate?
Right, we are looking to go to a single stream.
Single stream.
Right, and, but the ordinance goes beyond that, those changes. We'll have actually, we're gonna have a report and presentation and a vote, I believe, on the solid waste contract on the 28th that we'll be bringing in. And, but we'll be working on getting the report back on the ordinances and getting the necessary votes put together as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion's carried. Motion to adjourn by Mayor Murphy, second by Councilor Martin. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion's carried. We stand adjourned. Thank you.